Hello, everyone. We are here with a chapter that apparently a lot of you have been looking forward to, um, myself included. I think I've edited this coming chapter more than any other piece of literature that I've ever written. Honest to goodness, think I've done over 100 like read-throughs and edits of this thing.
Wow.
Yeah. I've gone through with a fine-tooth comb, and if I get anything if there's any grammatical errors on this at all, I would be very upset with myself at this point. When people are talking, it doesn't count because people don't always speak grammatically correct, but I think I got it I think I got it as good as I can possibly get it.
All right.
But before we get to all that, there were quite a few reviews, and most of them were longer than normal that we got here.
All
So
right.
let's see what everybody had to say about this.
All right. Chaos Control 85. Nice Marvel and Zombieland references there.
I have never seen Zombieland.
Oh, dude, you'd I know you hate horror, but you would genuinely love Zombieland. It's hilarious. It is making fun of zombie movies.
I know it's making fun of it, but there's still scary elements in it, and I don't think I'd handle that well.
Well, okay. Anyway, I'm sure that... What Zombieland reference, I wonder? Is it Double Tap?
Is that what it is?
Did you say double tap at any point?
At one point, Kurt says, "I'm sorry, I didn't double tap that crazy villain."
Yeah, that's
Is
Zombieland.
that a Zombieland
That
reference?
is Zombieland. That when I say that, when we're watching something, I'm referencing Zombieland.
I just thought it was a gamer reference.
No, that's Zombieland.
Well, you're not the first person I've heard reference
Okay.
it. So.
All right. Whatever. Anyway.
I honestly just thought it was a zombie.
Oh, my goodness.
Not a zombie. I thought it was a gamer reference.
All right. Not sure why, but despite everything being said in the Omaki, the prophecy I mentioned a few chapters ago seemed to be reinforced greatly, especially now that the story is about to come full circle. My main conjecture is Blake. With what just happened, his death might not mean the end of Team Lightning Drop, but it would almost guarantee the fall of Team Ruby completely. That, and he still hasn't properly proposed to Mina like he wanted to.
Can't have everything, man.
I also have a feeling that despite Kai being in the fight with Todoroki, he will eventually go to check on Mina before making it to the front line to either fight alongside Bakugo and Deku, or depending on how long the other fights go on and how long it takes to traverse the area, pull a Vegeta at the last possible moment against Cell and either distract or wound Nine enough that the other two would do their thing and finish him off. Whether or not expending himself like that would end him, especially with all his recent injuries, is still up in the air though. Either way, the next chapter awaits.
Yeah. That's not a bad theory. There's some things that I want to say to that, but I think I should let the next chapter play out before I'll try and come back to this. I'll try to remember to come back to this because there's a couple things I want to say to that.
Cool.
But Chaos Control 85, thank you so much for your review.
All right, let's see. It is Silver 4700.
All right, this one's mine.
Okay.
So Silver 4700 says, I was right, and I'm happy about it. Nabu Island's events would be the perfect place for Kai to die because everything before this acted as a closure for him in some form or fashion. So great. Not to mention that we finally have a villain capable of killing Kai. What are you talking about? What are you talking about? The Nomols killed him at the very beginning of this story. It's not a question of whether or not the villain's capable of killing Kai as so much as other people interfering and just plain circumstance sometimes. But there's a villain who has not killed him but got the ball rolling. We'll say that. Okay, let's see. Switch, just Uno reversed Kai. I can switch places with people too. Silver spawns in next to Switch. Thank you. Bless you. Switch. I'm sorry? Silver, you've done it. You've done the one thing that nobody else has been able to do for 3 whole years. Grabs Switch's hand and shakes it. Please, you absolutely must come over to one of my own stories to grace us with your presence. Your power, your character, your you. It would be perfect. Switch, let me start the New World Order with 9 and then we can talk. Not to mention the other guy who I need to talk to. Silver, yes, of course. Please go murder everyone. I will be cheering from the shadows. Looks down to the hero students panicking over Kurai's injury. Suck it, nerds! Mina shouting obscenities at Silver and Switch. Silver, that's so Lamau. Spawns out of existence. You have problems, dude.
That was beautiful.
If this is your weird way of asking if you can borrow Switch, go for it, dude. Just credit me as the creator. Man, you guys have problems.
They have problems? You're the one who's been like
I know it's ironic.
them.
I know it's filthy rich coming from me.
You're so loud, but I love you anyway. Okay, here we go.
Yeah. How long have you been waiting to write that? On that same topic, I like how you wrote the battle scenes. They were great to read, and Switch, if you can't tell so far, is a personal favorite of mine now. A great personality and a great example of a simple quirk having incredible power if used right instead of just having a super-powered quirk. Or I suppose 7 different quirks. Oh, I'm sorry. 3 quirks with 7 outputs. It's 1 quirk, 7 outputs after major modifications from his brother.
Ooh, that's some serious shade.
This is not the... Okay, for anybody who thinks I'm overreacting, if you've seen the Discord, you'll know that these people have been roasting me over this for like a month at this point.
Love it. Somebody needs to. I
never should have told you guys what his quirk actually was. I should have just left you to wonder.
Oh, man.
Let's see. 9. So wait, you're telling me that the kid is supposed to have 3 quirks? That's what the guy with the silver eyes gave me. Yes, 9. But then why do I have this ability which lets me control 9 quirks? Why can't I just take a couple quirks and then different outputs of those? I could save so many cells if I could do that. I could utilize the New World Order. But this kid can have 7 different superpowers with 3 quirks? Why the crap did I go to the quirk doctor for all these quirks if one can circumvent the system? You should have gone to Dr. Akaduri, man. Instead of Dr. Quack. These people are never going to let this go, are they?
No.
I love this story and I love your writing, man, but it's too easy to make these jokes.
Yep.
On the subject of 9, on the one hand, it's a shame that we didn't really get that much of an intro on him since he's kind of the main threat. On the other hand, it makes sense because if you did, then it would be we would just be rewriting the movie, since his encounter was strictly with Izuku and Bakugo. But we got Switch, so I'm not too hung up on this. More of a nitpick. Yeah, there wasn't anything I could do to rewrite the scene between where Deku and Bakugo fight 9. Like, once Deku and Kai split off, Deku's narrative went back to do its own thing, basically. There wasn't anything that I could add, so...
You good there?
Yeah, sorry, I just choked on my water a little bit. I'm not...
Like,
I don't know how I keep doing that.
He's dying over here.
Yep. Risking my life to bring you guys entertainment. I hope you appreciate it. Let's see. Also, I like what you're doing with Blake for the most part. Honestly, this is more character and emotions we got from her than even Ruby itself didn't give her that much character. Shots fired. The scene was a fascinating read. Obviously a bit dark, but it gives her character to an extent. I like it. A bit dark? I had to go to a dark place to pull out that stuff. What do you consider really dark?
You're really intense today.
I have energy today. I'm not recording this in the middle of the night.
Man. I'm sitting here drinking coffee and I'm like, whoa. Chill.
Never. Lastly, Deadwood appearing in the non-canon post-chapter dialogue doesn't count in my eyes. Well, too bad. I told you that he was going to appear and you said that was okay, so there. I don't know why, but I really want to see him. Maybe not necessarily in the super important parts because this is still a story with a set narrative and themes and emotions, but maybe he could appear in the Endeavor internship should your story make it that far. Not even as a major player, just a non-ambitious villain they take down in the internship. Half joking, half not, lol. Do what you want, doesn't matter to me. It kind of sounds like it matters to you. Bit of a longer review, but this was a bit of a longer chapter. Hope you have a good one and let the deaths begin. Oh man, if your review length correlates to the chapter length, oh man.
This next chapter is gonna be a
oh boy.
treat. All right.
Silver 4700, thank you for your review.
All right, Light Hero Kaiser. Most interesting, great chapter, mate. Can't wait for more. So I guess the time has come. Kaito, looks like it's unfortunate that this has to come. It has to happen. He will be missed.
I'm glad somebody will miss him.
Light, I'll get the tissues ready for next time. And if you get the ice cream. Kaito, yeah, I know. I'm just glad We had the healing spells when we were on Nabu Island.
That's just hacks.
Blade Hero Light and Bow Hero Impact signing out.
Well, I'm glad somebody's gonna miss him.
I know. Hey, well,
the rest
you know
of these
what?
little bloodthirsty gremlins.
Hey, they love him a lot more than they loved your Sandtel character.
This is true.
Everybody kind of hated him.
Yeah, they all liked Azura better. I need to at some point, like when I move on to my next fanfiction, I'm gonna like plan out a story with a main character, and then I'm gonna switch them out with the secondary character, because it seems like I somehow write the secondary characters better than I do.
You do.
The main characters.
Everyone falls in love with the secondary.
Everybody fell in love with Akudori. Everybody fell in love with Shuken. All it took was a half a chapter for that.
Yep. All right.
Well, thank you for your review, Light Hero Kaiser.
Okay.
Joe Clone.
Oh gosh, it's finally time. I guess my Paranormal Liberation War prediction was wrong.
Sorry, man.
Still, just because I complain about dragging the teased plot point, Kai's death, doesn't mean that I was impatient. Seems like, well, you may not have been, but everybody else was.
Yeah.
Seems like Kai really will die in the next chapter, and it's going to be painful. Also, hi Deadwood. Guess you finally made your Omaki cameo.
Yeah.
Everyone is busy with this one. Switch is creepy and unruly, and I hate her a lot. Same, buddy. I never saw Naruto Shippuden, but I do know the word for the nerd Renegon. What she did
Renegon.
Yeah. What she did to Kai was absolutely evil, and I feel like Blake in that moment. Horror that you'd stoop to friendly fire. Of course, I didn't snap like she almost did. It was a great fight, though.
Yeah, like I wanted, like when it was time for Kai to die, like there had to be something like really unexpected to bring it about, because kind of as some of you have pointed out, like he's stupid powerful. Like it either takes a lot to take him down or something just completely out of left field. I thought it'd be cool to at least kick things off with something out of left field.
The recovery was a big highlight of this chapter, because how would he even? I'm really impressed by the fact he didn't die right there, because man, he really could have.
I mean, if the sword had been placed just a little bit differently, yes, he easily could have bled out there, but dumb
luck.
I consulted dumb luck, and B, I consulted with a few different medical experts. I'm like, okay, what happens if someone gets stabbed here? Can they survive that? They're like, they can, but they're going to have to get medical attention really fast.
Yeah. All right.
I'm like, okay, they can get medical attention and they've got superpowers, so it doesn't seem unreasonable that he could potentially survive this. Although, he's not going to.
So relieved to see everyone doing their part to keep him alive, and also come up with the right plan to catch the terrorists. Katsuma really made the boys shine here. And I'm glad Mahiro made peace with Kudai. Talking about their brothers was a very clear topic for them to bond about. I got feels from that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wanted them to make nice, and like while I was planning this, I realized like a very strong topic, a very strong common topic for them would be how they feel about their younger brothers.
Mm-hmm.
So.
All right.
I'm glad that played off well.
The first lines of the prologue are here. Man, has it been almost 3 years since that first entry?
Yup.
Yeesh. Since then, Kudai's been in my head rent-free whenever I think about my hero.
Oh, wow.
That's so nice. That's a compliment.
Wow, thanks, dude.
I'm going to miss him in the story, but if you decide to put his ghost or some effigy of him in the Omaki from Death On, I'd be at peace with that. That was sweet. Now I'm thinking of him with a DBZ halo, threatening Red Swordsman Mataris with a deathly good time.
Threaten me with a good time.
Oh, I'm scared about this next one.
Oh, man.
Aww.
Yeah, like post-death won't be the last time we see Kudai. Like, there's going to be flashbacks, obviously, where his friends and his family are going to be thinking about him. So, like, this won't be the last time we see him, like, in the story, if that makes sense. But yeah. I don't know. I honestly, I kind of make up the Omaki scripts like on the fly. Like I don't plan I plan the story out very far in advance. The Omakis are just, I'm flying by the seat of my pants on that. Like, that's just typing. That's being thought out as my fingers are hitting the keyboard.
It's a good, and he knows better than to ever read them to me because I torture him endlessly and mercilessly because I have no patience for his omakis. Sorry.
Yeah.
They make no sense to me comically or logically or anything. No sense at all. Anyway, yay. Thank you, Joe Clone. I'm glad Joe Clone's at least going to miss him. I think everybody else will too. They're just doing that thing where they're like pushing somebody away before they leave because they don't want to feel anything. Right? Right? That's what I think.
I hadn't thought about that.
You hadn't?
No.
No, they love him.
Do they?
They just are waiting. They're bracing themselves because they don't want to cry.
Okay.
All right. That's my opinion, at least.
All right.
Okay.
So.
Last Robin.
All right.
Okay, this is a pretty.
I've got my mouth guard in. Let's go.
Okay, this is a pretty good chapter, but as you know, Last Robin does not deal with only compliments, and by this time the story is done, you may need reconstructive surgery on your jaw, and you will be on your 15th pair of dentures.
Oh boy.
Okay.
Threaten me with a good time.
First, the good. Switch is well done. I like her. I like her strategies. Be careful not to let her fall into the girl, quote unquote, girl villain who just hates hot people and girls archetype, because that's overdone. I agree.
I mean, okay.
Well written and has a good amount of length. Nice to see the supposed approaching death of Kudai, despite that you have released a Christmas imagery that has not been used, but I'll ignore that for now.
I mean, the Christmas, I've done holiday images before. They don't actually like tie into the story necessarily. Like, I think he's talking about the one where it's like Kudai holding Eri and Mina they're in front of the Christmas tree. Like that's just like how do I put, like, manga authors will like draw their characters like doing stuff for the holidays all the time, and it doesn't even have anything to do with the story. I mean, we got the My Hero Christmas episode in July, so I don't know what the logic was that.
Okay.
But
First off, for the bad. Justice for Deadwood.
oh my goodness.
Needs cameo. I disagree with Silver. I wrote him as a lousy hero, not a villain, but I have credit for the character.
Yes, you do have credit for creating the character.
I get what you're doing with Blake, but I don't know if it's necessary. I've always been iffy with the Ruby edition, but as I am not really of the opinion that they add much. So I hope you have a plan for a payoff in the narrative sense, not just emotional as otherwise. It just wasted space, especially since the other members feel pushed to the side and ignored.
I have both an emotional and a narrative payoff in the works.
Cool.
You guys know me. I do slow burns with this stuff. I'm not gonna give you instant gratification. That's not my style.
Kai's first instinct is to help enforcement. I've seen Kai's first instinct is to stick his nose where he thinks it should be in terms of beating up bad guys or pushing into private conversations. But that's me. And I know you'll attempt to rebut this, but just remember that you have a different perspective as the author that knows everything versus the reader that does not and just operates on what they see.
Okay. I mean, when I made that comment, I tried to make it through the eyes of Ida, who only knows what Ida knows. And, you know, he knows Kudai very well. So, I don't know, maybe I could have packed in a little more context to that statement, but I didn't think it was out of character or out of place for him to say it.
I kind of have trouble with the surgeon being the first responder for Kudai and having one surgeon do super invasive one surgeon surgery on the spot. Kind of feels a little unrealistic, but I don't feel like opening that can of worms.
I mean, you ever hear some survival stories about people that survived thanks to combat medics and the stuff that they had to go through in the field?
But what are the odds?
They can pull off some pretty amazing stuff.
What are the odds? Okay. Well,
now you've got that "What Are the Odds" song stuck in my head. Thanks.
You're welcome. We shall see what happens next. That's all for now. Off the next chapter with you. Get on it. Don't pass go. Don't collect two. Sorry, Monopoly. That's not right. Good work. Review Haiku.
Oh,
Justice for Deadwood. He deserves more than a thought. Switch is pretty cool.
I mean, sorry, not sorry about Deadwood. I said that he was going to be in the story. I didn't say how.
But
he'll be in the story eventually. It's just, yeah. You guys have been giving me so much grief. You know what? This is kind of my little back to you guys. So there. I'm not salty at all.
All right. Thank you, Last Robin.
Yes, thank you for your review, dude.
All right. Shimanega.
It's a mare.
Yeah, I figured. He's gonna die. He's gonna die. He's gonna die. It's here, ladies.
You guys have problems.
It's here, ladies and gentlemen. Kudai's death. That's literally all I have to write. Sorry, bit out of it, but the chapter was amazing, and I'm very much looking forward to his final breaths.
You guys have problems. You should not be this excited about this.
I'm telling you, they're just emotionally bracing themselves so they don't feel things.
All right, so a full page Silly Kita has given us.
Okay, Silly Kita. Thank All Might I don't have to eat my Stetson. Oh, I forgot about that. Yeah, good.
Yeah, I said he was going to eat his Stetson if he didn't die during the Nabu Island arc.
That was a fantastic opening sentence. Seriously, you have no idea how much anxiety I've been having over the possibility of being wrong this time around. Oh, you wouldn't have had to do it, and we never would have. We
would have no way of holding you to that.
Clearly, he's a man of his word. I never thought I'd feel so relieved to know that a main character is about to bite it. But before all that, what a chapter. I was initially somewhat disappointed to realize that we would not be getting to see the entirety of Team Ruby in action against Switch. Cool characters design, by the way. But by the end of the fight with her, I completely forgot my gripe. Ruby and Yang tag teaming without anyone else around is something I wish I could have seen more in the original, considering that they are siblings who have similar goals and would have undoubtedly trained together even before going to school to become huntresses/heroes. They play so well off each other, both in fighting and verbal dynamics. So thank you for giving us a scene like that one.
Yeah, in the original, I understand the narrative, it's either they're all together as a 4-person team or they have them in pairs. But there was that bit in the school tournament where it was Yang and Weiss working together. And I was completely taken aback by that. I was like, wait, really? You're not going to take this opportunity to have Ruby and Yang working together? What just Yang and Weiss just seemed like the most random pairing to me, which it worked. After I saw the fight, I was like, okay, cool, that makes sense. I enjoyed that, but I was like, I'm of the same. So I'm of the same opinion. I wish that there had been more Ruby and Yang tag team happening, whenever they had to split off in pairs, and I never really got to see that. So presented the opportunity here, I was absolutely going to take it.
Cool. Weiss getting subbed in for He Who Shall Not Be Named was a surprise that I didn't really know how to feel about until I started getting a handle on the surprise villain attack. It's sometimes easy to forget that she once aimed to lead Team Ruby because, in all fairness, she probably would have been good at it once she had a chance to mellow out. She gets to show off the skills that gave her that kind of confidence and drive here, which is more than Rooster Teeth had done for her. Teeth grinding commences. Sorry, I mean to say, well done with the incorporation of the girls into this plot.
Thank you.
Now, given that you were cutting between different fights so regularly for a little while there, I really should have realized that something was up when you suddenly kept the focus on the Switch fight. And as for the conclusion, talk about subverting expectations. As soon as Kai, Blake, and Mina showed up, my honest thought was, oh, well, placeholder's done her thing. Guess this is over. I legitimately thought that you'd created this villain to counter the heroes, increase the numbers advantage, and nothing more. So when that happened, I had to reread the paragraph a couple times just to make sure I hadn't misunderstood. Not only did you pull a fast one on me with this villain, you basically brought Kai down with one thing that no one in their class would ever even consider a possibility: his friend's own weapon.
Yep.
What a brilliantly cruel thing to do, making the catalyst of his downfall be friendly fire. I didn't expect to
execute Order 66. do you know what the joke is with that? So F is the 6th letter of the alphabet. So Order 66 could be Order FF, Order Friendly Fire.
Yeah, I had heard that. Why is that funny?
It's so terrible that it's fun. I don't know.
I've heard that before, but I never thought it was funny. I just thought it was morbid. Okay. I didn't expect to be what actually killed him. Given that this was more sudden than than it was dramatic, even not by much. Even in spite of my surprise that it actually happened once it became clear that he was... Wait. I feel like I skipped a line.
Even in spite of my surprise that it actually happened, once it became clear that he was going to survive, something about the way the story was going on made me wonder if there wasn't going to be more to it, which by the end of the chapter is confirmed.
Okay.
Do you want me to keep going?
I'm going to let you go because, sorry, dude, the lack of spacing between your paragraphs kills my dyslexia.
Oh, dear.
I do love reading your reviews. I just can't.
Let's see. I'll get to that in a bit, but first I wanted to make mention of how cute that interaction between Maharu and Kurai was. That was more along the lines of what I expected from our guardian hero when he interacts with little kids, so I'm glad to know he didn't just suddenly change his character dynamic out of nowhere. Seeing them bond over the topic of their younger brothers, which why did I not see coming, was truly heartwarming and serves to help establish Kurai's bond with these siblings as something of his own instead of a mere substitute for what happens in the original movie. Yeah, I think I was talking about that a little bit earlier. Let's see. The scenes with Blake were, well, they were certainly riveting. I give you that, and in a good way. I think at one point I had a half-formed suspicion that she liked Kurai after she told him a bit about her past, but nothing more was said on the matter, so I assumed that I was incorrect. Now I see that it's more likely that because the story has been more focused on Kurai and what he's doing, we as the audience simply were not given more opportunities to notice her feelings. That, and it speaks to her character, having had these feelings all this time and not acting on them because of her respect for Mina and Kurai's relationship. Hell, she even helped him when he was struggling to come up with something for Mina's birthday. Although given that he's about to kick the bucket, I'm sure we'll have plenty of opportunities to see how her role in his death will affect both herself, those feelings, and how those in turn affect those around her. It's an interesting dynamic reveal, and while I doubt you're the type to take a story in this direction, I really hope you don't make things explode into some kind of catfight between Blake and Mina at the funeral, because, yeah, no, don't want that, please and thank you. Now for the closing scene. Yeah, dude, I'm not, like I said last chat, I'm not about love triangles. I don't like those. Like, that for me was like the low point of the Hunger Games. So I was just like, oh my goodness, she's gonna end up with Peeta. Give it. Stop it. This is not necessary. So yeah, don't worry about that. I don't think that counts as a spoiler, but no, I'm not gonna do that. Let's see. Now for the closing scene. It's happening. Nearly 3 years we've been waiting, and our patience is about to pay off. Yes, y'all are sick. Okay, to be perfectly fair, it hasn't been a truly difficult wait. You've kept this story very interesting and alive, in spite of knowing the hero's fate. So I can't claim to feel a sense of indignant impatience. I have been waiting / wanting to see how he would fall, but I haven't been lacking for entertainment in the interim. All the same, I am glad that we will finally have our answer, while also being very sad to see Kai go. Okay, so maybe not so sick. My bad, dude. Him wanting to leave his friends and family the closure that his dad didn't was something that, again, I didn't see playing into him leaving this final message, but I really should have. I really like the context that he has absolutely no certain proof that he's going to die, but he simply wants to be prepared just in case. We know that he's going to die because you've assured us as much, but I was very curious as to how he was going to have the time / presence of mind to leave behind such a message when he's supposed to be dying, and this now makes perfect sense. Yeah, I very briefly thought about him like making a quick "okay, I'm about to die" message like while they're in the fight, but then I just like, nah, there's no time for that. There's like if he can be talking that much and he's in the middle of a fight, it's not in his nature to be doing it. He'd just be going into the action. So for him to be leaving this message, it had to be done somewhat in advance. Let's see. I like Akudori a lot, and I hope to see him become more of a main character in the wake of his brother's loss, but I really do like Kurai too. I don't think that he deserves to die as a character, but you have unarguably woven a rich, powerful narrative leading up to his demise that I'm certain is going to hit me in the gut with all the feels when the moment comes. Bring on the next chapter, Mataris. I'm sure it's going to be truly plus ultra. P.S. Who the hell is Deadwood? Was there something on the podcast that I missed because I've never seen this guy in any of your work so far? I'm very confused and I'm sorry if I've missed something obvious.
No.
Thanks for the review, first off. And second, Deadwood is a character that some of the readers have come up with in the Discord.
Specifically, Last Robin?
I think, yeah. I think I made some comments or other, and then he like took off with it, and then made it into a character.
Okay.
Yeah. So I said something along the lines of like Deadwood, Deadpool's less ambitious cousin, and then Robin took off with it.
I see. Deadpool's less ambitious cousin. Oh, that's hilarious. I love it. See, I'm in the Discord, but I don't always check it. It's like depends on how exhausted I am from children and children.
Yep.
So,
Which children? That's the question.
yeah, the school ones or the home ones?
I love that opening comment. Thank All Might, I don't have to eat my Stetson.
That was beautiful. All right, is that the whole
That
review?
is the whole review.
Okay, thank you,
That is the
Silly
last
Kita.
review for this one. Yeah. Thanks everybody for your reviews. I will stop talking now and let you get on to the longest chapter that I've written so far for the story. Like, holy cow. So far, yeah. Like, okay, so I'll talk a little bit more. I thought the chapter where he fought the Shadow Nomu was going to be the longest one that I wrote for this, because, like, that was where he came into his identity as the Guardian Hero. But then this chapter happened. So, yeah, enjoy, guys.
From the moment I reached the other side, I could not hide from the great divide. I can't turn back time, I'm a soul what's mine. Get back what I lost, no matter the cost. Is there no way home? Is there no way home?
The Guardian Hero. The sun had just departed the horizon when the villains began their approach under the watchful eye of Nabu Island's heroes. "They're taking the path you predicted," Earphone Jack said to Deku and Kai, the latter of whom nodded grimly. It had been decided the previous evening that the class would take on the villains in groups after separating them with long-range attacks that would be all but impossible to stand against directly. Their battleground of choice was a small spit of land that sat off the coast of Nabu, which hosted some kind of temple ruins atop a small mountain that was perfect to double as a shelter for the island population. It allowed the heroes to take the high ground in multiple areas, and they knew they needed to take every advantage that they could get. Izuku had pointed out that the leader had a shielding quirk that would likely be able to withstand any of their initial assaults, so they set up their traps with the thought in mind that the boss would press on alone if he had to. The others could then attack in waves and force him to overuse his quirks, which would eventually allow them to capture him once he collapsed. Meanwhile, 3 teams had been put together in order to target each of the other villains backing up the new power thief. Without any of his cronies to bail him out, they could ensure that the new All-for-One wouldn't be able to make another getaway. Now, through the lens of a monocular, Creati was keeping an eye on the approach of the villains as they walked across the single strip of dry land that connected the old ruins to the rest of the island. "Phase 1 is underway," Shoto said from next to Kai, whose eyes and veins began to glow green as he prepared one of his ultimate moves. "We're almost up." He, Deku, Tentacle, Creati, Tailman, and Ground Zero were the last lines of defense between Katsuma and the villains. The boy and his sister were staying close to the heroes, just on the off chance that one of the villains snuck past them and tried to go looking for him among the islanders, who were hidden in the caverns that ran under the mountain, having Sugarman and Anima to protect them. "I'm ready," Kai replied softly, his mechanical arm clenched tightly. "Where's your scouter at?" Tentacle asked his friend as he noticed a particular item missing from his head, the other boy shrugging in response. "Took some damage when I bombed myself yesterday, so I decided to leave it behind at the shelter," he replied as he kept his eyes trained on the approaching villains. "Even if it was working, we still don't have a signal, so the comm function wouldn't help us in this situation." "Aoyama's getting prepped," Earphone Jack then said without another outward glance. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. True to her count, Can't Stop Twinkling unleashed his ultimate move, Supernova, from down below them, the dazzling light big enough to swallow the quartet of villains whole and vaporize them if it made direct contact. However, as Izuku had predicted he would, the leader of the villains conjured a shield to deflect the oncoming threat. That didn't stop the secondary laser bursts that flew from the shining hero's shoulders and knees, which were targeted at the other villains behind him, quickly forcing them to scatter in multiple directions. The heroes kept an eye out, noticing that the Beast Man had been successfully driven away from all 3 of his comrades, but the 2 women had managed to stick together. "Now we're on," Kai muttered as he placed a hand on Shoto's shoulder, using his Giving Heart technique to transfer a small portion of his power into his friend. He took special care not to give so much that he would pass out, as he wasn't planning on napping through the upcoming fight. After all, his part in this was not yet done. "Ready, pal?" he growled as they sighted the woman responsible for his near-fatal injury. "Let's do it." "Kaito combo!" The two of them muttered as they stood back to back. Kai with his right hand aimed at their quarry, and Shoto with his left arm doing the same as the air around them began to heat up.
Prominence flash!
White-hot flames mixed with energon and raced down the mountainside in a brilliant beam, scorching the ground beneath as it barreled toward the two enemy villains. It was a far improved version of the attack that they had used against Gang Orca during the licensing exam, allowing for Kodai to have less exposure to the awful heat that had knocked him out the first time they had used it in combat. The trade-off was that the fire was only so much hotter because of the energy that Kai supplied to his teammate, but Shoto was also now much more adept at controlling the heat's output in a way that wouldn't hurt his friends so much. The powerful technique didn't hit their enemies, but the area where they had been was annihilated with an incendiary burst, leaving no sign that anything green had ever lived there. Phase 1 is complete, Earphone Jack said after a tense moment of her listening intently through her auxiliary ear cable. All 4 villains have been separated, and our teams are in place. She stood up and quickly moved to stand behind Shoto, her arms encircling him from behind as he cooled them all off with a brief chill burst. That's a relief, Deku breathed. For us. Kai coughed through a smirk, wiping red spittle off the corner of his mouth, while Shoto conjured an ice ramp that would lead him and Earphone Jack down the mountainside to join up with Cellophane. I'd hate to be in those villains' shoes, especially the one that nearly got me killed. Shoto slid to a stop on the ramp a little more than halfway down the mountain, where Cellophane was hiding. I'm ready to move as soon as you give the word, he said from where he was kneeling behind a boulder, unseen by Nine, who had kept up his unhurried pace toward the top of the temple ruins, where he knew his prize was being guarded. We'll attack in waves, the half-and-half hero said as he locked eyes with their newest enemy. Jiro, make some ammo for Sora while I get things started. I'm on it. Without another word, Shoto sent forth a new wave of ice that obscured Nine from view. Though based on the explosion of frozen debris coming from down the mountain path, he knew the villain was nowhere near being stopped yet. Meanwhile, Earphone Jack was using sonic pulses from her cables to break up the ice behind them and turn it into smaller pieces that their classmate would be able to hurl at high speeds with his tape. Shoto's eyes noticed a subtle change in their target's defensives, and if Deku's analysis of the villain's quirks was accurate, and it almost always was, their enemy was about to counterattack. Both of you, get behind me! He shouted as he dropped the ice barrage and unleashed a blast of fire that was just in time to intercept a number of purple lasers that would have skewered them otherwise. We're ready to go back here, Cellophane said from behind his back. Just say the word. Shoto waited another moment before he shut off his fire and said, Go! Slice shook off the debris that had landed on top of her as she examined her surroundings, finding them to be a dark underground cavern littered with stalagmites, stalactites, and a small river gurgling nearby. A plan to split us up, huh? She mused as she brushed out her bright hair. She had to hand it to the heroes. Young or not, they had definitely caught her comrades off their guard. Even so, that wouldn't stop. Recipro burst! Slice barely managed to duck under a high-speed kick from a hero in thick armor. She followed this by unleashing a burst of needles from her hair that forced him to retreat, but now he had a friend backing him up. Red Gauntlet! A boy with rock-hard skin shouted as he charged forward, immune to the razor-sharp hair's attack as he aimed a mighty punch toward her midsection, which she knew would do more than leave her with a bruise if it connected. Still, her quirk wasn't all that Slice had going for her, and she moved using the flexibility she had worked hard to achieve and maintained all her life to evade harm once again, before turning her hair into a set of flexible, diamond-hard blades that could move according to her whims. Your power and his armor may let you deflect the small ones, but let's see how you handle this, she said with a sneer. This was right before she was knocked into a stalagmite by an unseen force, disorienting her temporarily as she tried to make sense of what had happened. As her vision began to clear, she saw a boy with a raven's head approaching at an unhurried pace, a monstrous shadow protruding from his back and moving to cover his body as he said, Ida, Kirishima, leave the rest to me. With an unmistakable air of menace, Tsukuyomi gripped his bladed gauntlets and added, The darkness is my domain. You cheeky boy. Slice grinned as she flexed her fingers, causing small daggers to sprout from hidden compartments in her gloves over each individual appendage. Better watch who you're calling a boy, Red Rat warned her as he and Ingenium remained on standby. We're not heroes for no reason, lady. We're men. Chimera found himself near a waterfall, wondering what had become of his comrades, but also being fairly unworried by the prospect of an ambush. They got me on my own, he mused. So what are they... Ah! He howled in pain as a bullet tore through his left ear, drawing blood and causing him to clutch at the wound angrily. No sooner than he glared in the direction of where the bullet had come from than did he find himself being surrounded by 4 girls, all of them armed with glares of disgust, nothing he wasn't really used to. One of them looked ridiculously young, so he scoffed at them, in spite of the pain in his head that had resulted from a sniper round. "You've got to be kidding me," he snorted contemptuously as he plucked a cigar from his pocket and lit it in his mouth with a short puff of fire. "Are little girls really the only ones brave enough to fight me? What did all your friends get scared off from yesterday? I wasn't even serious." "Today's a different game," said the smallest one, wielding a scythe with a blade alone that was nearly taller than her. "With any civvies nearby, we can go all out," said the tall blonde with a wicked grin as her gauntlets made a cocking sound akin to a loaded shotgun. "If you want a serious fight, you're about to get one," added a slim heroine dressed in white. "For the record, we're not just girls," muttered the one wearing black. "We're American." "Specifically from Texas," Firecracker said as they began to circle their quarry, who was eyeing them shrewdly. "We love our guns." "And one of your friends is responsible for almost killing one of ours," Gambleshroud warned their enemy. "We intend to pay that back with interest." Chimera grinned viciously as he flexed his muscles, shredding through the sleeves of his overcoat and sprouting large blue feathers on his arms. "Bring it on!" "I take it you're looking for a rematch, huh?" Switch sneered as Acid Queen glared at her from beneath a tree, pungent acid dripping from her fingertips. "Tell me, how long did it take for your handsome friend to bleed out? Or is he still holding on, trying desperately to cling to a worthless life that's soon to end at the hands of 9? "Trust me, this is not going to be much of a match," the heroine answered with an uncharacteristic harshness in her voice. "And he's the one that scared off your friends to lead you to me, so that I could deal with you myself." Uravity, Invisible Girl, and Froppy all realized that she was well past the point of simple anger. She was downright furious, and to see such hatred on her face was unsettling in the extreme. "I hope she can keep it together," Uravity thought nervously as Switch's eyes began to gleam purple, indicating that she was ready to use her quirk at any given moment. Right now she could only see her and Acid Queen, since Froppy and Invisible Girl were using their quirks to remain hidden until the opportune moment to strike, so hopefully they had the advantage. When the villain settled into a slight crouch as if she were getting ready to run before she whispered, "When this is all over, you'll be so ugly your own boy toy won't want to look at you. When I'm done with you, your own mother won't be able to look your way." Acid Queen shot back venomously. "Oh, real original." Switch snickered as her enemy narrowed her eyes. "What's next, an old warp refraction?" A blinding light exploded in front of the villain, causing her to let out a shout of surprise as her optical nerves were assaulted and the battle began. "Counterbalance! Tape shot trident!" Earphone Jack's concussive sound waves pulsed through the air from Nine's left, while Cellophane hurled ice chunks at him from the right. He repelled them with a barrier, followed by lasers from his fingertips. Cellophane evaded the counterattack, while Earphone Jack simply shifted the aim of her boots and nullified the lasers with an extra powerful burst of sound. Neither of their attacks were meant to be finishing moves, but they were forcing the villain to use his powers, which would hopefully get him closer to reaching his limit before the final act of Phase 2 could begin. "And here's hoping we don't have to let it get to Phase 3. The hearing heroine thought as she took a knee and planted her hands on the ground while shouting, "Heartbeat distortion!" The ground beneath Nine was ripped apart, sending solid rock chunks up in the air, which Cellophane snatched up and hurled at their enemy before it could pass him by. Nine continued his forward path, unhurried and seemingly unconcerned, while he beat their attacks away as though they were no more a threat to him than a couple of mosquitoes. So far, it didn't even seem as though he was being worn down, but Izuku had mentioned that he hadn't keeled over until the last minute. It was very likely that they would have no real way of knowing how close he was to hitting his limit, and thus they would have to fight as hard as they could for as long as they could. Cellophane suddenly cried out in pain. One of the ice shards that Nine had destroyed with his lasers sent a chunk back at the boy, which had struck him in the head, shattering the glass on his helmet and cutting him right beneath his hairline. He fell over backwards, so Earphone Jack redoubled her efforts, hoping to get the villain's attention enough that he wouldn't go after her friend. This was when she finally heard Shoto yell above the noise, "I'm all set back here. Sarah, we gotta bail now!" The slight girl called to her teammate, who was getting to his feet. With a single nod, he shot out a piece of tape and snatched her up toward him while using his other arm to yank them both up the mountain, passing by Shoto, who was glaring down at the villain without so much as a glance in their direction. He did, however, call back, "Keep going. I don't want you anywhere near what comes next." Cellophane didn't need to be told twice. He could already feel the air around them dropping rapidly in temperature, so he knew what was about to happen. Shoto settled in a wide stance before he unleashed a monstrous wave of ice at his opponent, bigger than the attack he had used at the sports festival against Midoriya. It buried half the mountainside below him in a glacier, and he was just getting started. His internship with Hawks during the fall semester had seen to him focusing on improving his reaction times and precision moves under high pressure, but for this next maneuver, he would be falling back on lessons far older. His training under Endeavor, hated though it had been, had served to help Shoto understand what his body would start to do when he pushed either his ice or fire too far. In order to draw out the maximum power of his quirk, he would have to approach not just one, but both of those deadly limits. With the ice firmly in place, he concentrated on regulating the temperature, dropping it into sub-0 degrees. Frost began to coat his whole body, not just his right side, lulling him dangerously close to the darkness of unconsciousness, but he refused to let go just yet. We can't let this madman get close to the kids, he thought as he pushed himself well past the limits of the cold he could safely handle, no longer able to move the right half of his body at all. If he gets past us, it will fall to Bakugo and Midoriya, and Hikari won't be able to hold himself back. He'll fight, and we can't let it get to that. Everyone in the class knew that if they couldn't hold this villain off, Kai would fight him, injured or not, doctor's warning notwithstanding. Katsuma had managed to heal him better than before, but the physician that had examined him still detected internal bleeding that could spill into his lung if he overdid it. This was why they had created a plan where his part in it was minimal, and every single one of his friends were determined to keep it that way. He had already fought more than enough on their behalf for them to allow another loss on his part. The USJ ambush, Island's violent heist, the summer camp attack, the Hasaikai raid, and more. In every battle he had been forced into alongside his friends, Kai had given nothing less than his all to see it through so that they could walk away in one piece, and had given pieces of his own flesh to make it so. Even now, with his body severely wounded, where many others would have had every right to say that enough was enough, the Guardian hero was still standing, determined to do everything he could to stop these villains. He would never stop standing, and whether he knew it or not, that determination had fueled a new drive toward victory in his classmates. Just when Shoto could no longer stand the Arctic air around him, he shut off his ice and switched over to the fire that raged within the left half of his body. He let out a ringing shout of pain as the frost evaporated off his skin, leaving him with awful steam burns that made his flesh look as though his childhood scar had spread, but he did not stop. He willed the temperature in his body to climb until the fire roared to life across his arm and leg. Come on, he thought as he saw a purple glow beginning to emanate from the frigid prison that he had created for the villain. Hotter. More. He had to protect the civilians on the island. He needed to save Katsuma, an innocent victim in the sights of a power-hungry villain. I have to keep Hikari from fighting anymore. He's done more than enough for all of us. Now it's our turn to protect him. The flames turned blue as he forced his power to go beyond even what his renowned father would have accomplished, the heat washing over the entire island as he prepared what would be his last strike. Arctic Flash, he grunted, spitting out the words painfully. Solaris Wave! He sent forth the azure flames to hit the point in the ice where he guessed 9 to be, allowing them to wash over the frozen structure and promptly melt it in its entirety. The result was an explosion that shook all of Nabu Island, not just the temple ruins. Shoto was unable to withstand the blast that he had generated, and went flying through the air, back up toward his wide-eyed companions, though he could not see them. Before the darkness finally claimed him, he could only wonder, did I do what I needed to? Hikari? Damn it! Kai shouted, taking a step forward as they saw their enemy still standing amid the giant crater that Shoto had created with his attack, having been protected by a shielding quirk. The Guardian hero wanted to go and help his friend, but he was held back by Tentacle and Creati. Todoroki's still in the line of fire, he said as he pointed at their comrade, who had collapsed a few hundred meters in front of the villain. Zero is on it, the multi-armed boy replied calmly. Our main reason for concern should be the fact that he wasn't able to stop him with that, Tailman said nervously as they watched 9 continue to advance at an unhurried pace. Jiro and Sero could only do so much at this point without Todoroki to back them up. Cellophane snatched up Shoto in his arms, flinching at the heat that the unconscious hero was still emanating, and seeing the burns covering his flesh. He's in bad shape, he told his teammate, who was eyeing 9 with no small amount of anxiety. We're about to be in the same boat, she said as she plugged her auxiliary cables into her boots again. 9 regarded them with a bored expression from behind his mask before he asked, Is that all? He flexed his fingers toward them, his nails glowing purple for a second before he swept his hand back and conjured a shield, just in time to block a shining laser that looked familiar to the heroes. Aoyama? Earphone Jack called down as they saw their friend, struggling to remain upright as he aimed his naval laser at their enemy. It was clear that he had been partially caught up in the explosion meant for the villain, because his armor was blackened and part of his face and hair had been singed. Now's your chance, he groaned as his laser fizzled out. Run! He was then buried in a small landslide that Nine caused with a burst of wind springing from his shield, stirring up mud and rocks that took the shining hero out of the equation.
It's no use,
He told Cellophane in Earphone Jack. Purple lightning danced around him as wind began to stir through the air before he added,
playtime is over.
The instant before he could strike down the three of them, a raw-throated scream of rage and explosions barreled toward Nine, culminating in a huge blast that forced the man to conjure a trio of shields to protect himself. Ground Zero slammed into the biggest one and was instantly repelled with a grunt of effort, forcing him to land back on the ground, whereupon he directed a vicious smile at his enemy, who seemed surprised to see him.
You're still alive?
He muttered. Yeah, Ground Zero snarled in response. Guess you should have hit me harder. Then he was back in the air, using his autocannon to rain explosions down on Nine while Cellophane and Earphone Jack beat a hasty retreat, apparently deciding to let their classmate handle things his way, even though he had initiated Phase 3 early. There was a shudder in the air that heralded the arrival of Deku, blazing with lightning as he pushed his quirk to the 25% limit that he had mastered. Katsuma and Mahara watched him go, each of them praying for his safety as Kai watched alongside them, the knuckles on his left hand whitening as he gripped the stone wall in front of him angrily, wishing that he could fight alongside them. He couldn't use his long-range techniques at this point. He would end up hitting one of his allies on accident if he did. All he could do was wait and watch. While Nine kept up his shield to hold Ground Zero's assault, Deku soared through the air to deliver a thunderous sidekick from above, screaming, St. Louis, smash! The kick connected with the shield, giving Bakugo time to break from his own attack and work out a better angle of approach while Nine was preoccupied. Deku knew that he didn't need to go all out at this point, not like Shoto had. I don't need to break him with my full power, he thought as he struggled against the shield in front of him. I just need to make him use his quirks. Then he was flung away with an airburst and a yell of surprise, the resistance that Nine had put up suddenly increasing tenfold. Ground Zero reached out his hand and caught the other hero by the arm with a loud growl of displeasure before he started to use a series of explosions to whirl Deku around himself, building their momentum up to the speed of a cannon blast before releasing his rival at the Nine with the word, Explodapult! Deku sailed into the Nine's newly reformed shield with power comparable to the strength of All Might in his prime, and was rewarded with the villain's shield finally breaking, sending him back a few paces in a storm of wind and dust. He and Ground Zero landed next to one another, both of them breathing heavily as the air began to clear, revealing their enemy, who had managed to protect himself with another, smaller shield. Still, it was the first time they had managed to keep him in check and halt his advance, even if only for a few seconds. It counted toward the beginnings of a victory for them, and they took pride in it. Even Nine was impressed to a degree. Dropping the shield, he eyed the young heroes with renewed caution before he conceded to say,
Not a bad effort.
We're just getting started, Deku retorted confidently under the watchful eyes of his friends. Ground Zero took it a step further, his hands still sparkling as he declared, Now we'll kill you! The explosion that ripped across the island only minutes prior caused a series of collapses where Tsukuyomi was battling Slice, forcing them, as well as Red Riot and Ingenium, to dodge the falling rubble as much as the attacks from each other. Sounds like Nine is taking care of your little friends, Slice sneered as she slashed at a recovering Dark Shadow, who growled angrily in response while its master evaded the sharp blades of her hair. Don't underestimate the heroes of UA, Red Riot shouted, having suddenly appeared behind the woman. Ingenium had hurled him down from above after using a Recipro Extend to get high among the stalactites of the cavern, adding gravity to the already considerable momentum given to them by the speed boost. As he crashed into the woman, the redhead hardened his body to maximum, giving him the appearance of a living rock golem while he roared, We are unbreakable! Slice panicked and lashed at him with her hair, only to recoil in shock as he crashed straight through her weapons, breaking her defenses like dried kindling. Before she could recover her footing, he darted forward with the war cry, Red Counter! His boulder-like fist smashed into her abdomen hard enough to send her flying toward Ingenium, who was already charging them with blue fire streaming from his exhaust ports. Recipro Turbo! He announced before delivering a max power kick to the small of Slice's back, sending her soaring into the waiting clutches of Dark Shadow, who grabbed her up like a broken ragdoll.
Black Abyss! Piercing Twilight!
Tsukuyomi roared as he delivered the final blow, smashing Slice into the ground and burying her under a pile of rubble. Unfortunately, the violent exchanges had coupled with Todoroki's blast to cause an almost total cavern collapse around the three young heroes. With practically nowhere to run, They all lashed out with their powers as best they could, striking at every rock that fell toward them, trying to stave off death by burial. In the end, though, their fights over the last 2 days had worn them out, and they were forced to yield to the crushing weight of the stones above them. The sound of the collapse drew Deku's attention, leading him to worry for his friends as he saw the extent of the damage to the landscape further down the mountain. Ida, Kirishima, Tokoyami, he thought concernedly. I hope they're okay. He was brought out of his thoughts when Ground Zero kicked him out of the way of a laser blast, sending him rolling in the dust. Pay attention, you damn nerd! The explosive voice shouted as he charged back into the fray. Yeah, I'm trying to! Creati was holding 9 back with consecutive cannon blasts from weapons she had managed to make with some of the last of her lipids, in order to give them a few seconds of reprieve, but she was clearly coming up on her limit, so it was important that someone get his attention again before he could figure out that she was near the children. Ground Zero did just that by letting loose with a maximized blast from the stored sweat in his right gauntlet that he had been saving since the previous day, forcing 9 to hide behind another set of shields that held him in place for a few seconds. I'm not going to lose to this guy, especially not for a second time, the explosive hero vowed silently as Deku fired off a series of Delaware smashes. I'm damn well sick of Hogasha doing all the rescuing around here. Now it's my turn to win. Chimera let Crescent Rose crash into him at high speed, his meaty hand shooting out with surprising speed to grab her scythe by the shaft and stop the blade before it cut at him. Pitiful, he snapped before hurling her at Myrtanaster, who was skating forward on a series of hexes that were adding to her speed the more that she stepped on them. Instead of trying to evade completely, the white-haired heroine ducked low while her teammate fired around from her sniper rifle to change her momentum and soar over her friend's head. Myrtanaster stabbed at the monster with her rapier, wincing for a second when he grabbed the thin blade barehanded, even as he used his tail to smack Gamble Shroud away, and his left fist beat back Firecracker. Then her expression changed into a superior smirk, followed by a copper hex that appeared in front of Chimera's face, confusing him more than her sudden change of mood. His confusion doubled when she suddenly became a white blur that raced away from him, even as her companions became no more than colored shadows that flitted at the edge of his vision, too quick for him to keep track of. He tried to strike back several times, but he was now accumulating cuts on his body left and right, though his thick fur and tough skin prevented even Crescent Rose's weapon from causing any permanent damage. Bullets hardly broke his skin, though he was sure that one of the sniper rounds had fractured a shin bone. Give it up, old man, he heard the blonde one taunt as the quartet slowed to a stop around him, their weapons all aimed at his head. Once you're in Weiss's temporal contraction hex, you'd lose in a race against a snail. The beast-like man snarled, his cigar turning to ash in his mouth as he snorted flames angrily. Don't be so insolent, he growled as his muscles began to bulge even further, shredding through most of his clothing. I'll show you why I've been called a monster my entire life! He bellowed loud enough for the girls to cover their ears on reflex, and disrupting their concentration that Myrtanaster needed for such a complex sigil, freeing him from the slowing effects of her quirk. He got bigger? Firecracker yelped in surprise, for indeed Chimera had nearly doubled in muscle mass and height, and he more resembled a monster from ancient Greek mythology than that of a large man with wolf skin. The horns of a ram protruded from his head, and phoenix wings decorated his beefy arms while his hands and feet sprouted 4-inch claws like a lion's. He had become, in every sense of the word, a monster. He breathed in deep, scarlet light shining from between his fangs as he glared at Myrtanaster, who gulped nervously. That can't be good, she said. Scatter! Crescent Rose shouted just in time for Chimera to breathe a bright red laser that ignited anything it touched. Trees, dirt, even bare stone. The speedy heroine snatched up her sister, while Myrtanaster helped Gamble Shroud with her hexes to make an escape into a nearby river runoff that branched into the pool where they had escaped from their opponent. Now what? Firecracker grunted as they felt the heat wave pass over them. When her sister didn't answer immediately, she shook her shoulder and repeated, Now what, sis? I don't know. Switch was laughing as she struck Gravity a heavy blow across her head, breaking her helmet and sending her sprawling across the forest floor. Acid Queen grit her teeth and skated in close, coating her fist in acid before trying to hit the elusive villain, only to find her hand buried in a tree trunk that sizzled in reaction to the corrosive substance. Ribbit! Froppy croaked as her tongue wrapped around Switch's leg. The villain was surprised, having not realized there was a fourth hero among the group, largely because the frog girl had been using her camouflage technique to stay hidden until the prime opportunity to strike. Now she flung the woman up in the air before yanking her downward, seemingly to slam her into the ground with enough force to knock her out. Switch had other ideas, of course. As she began her downward descent, she cast her eyes about, looking for one of the other girls to exchange places with. She could phase out in place of a stone or a tree, of course, but she had seen what happened to their morale once a hero struck down one of their comrades. It would only make her job easier to complete if she could get them to turn on one another. For a second, it seemed that the others were hiding, but then she saw the gloves and boots of the girl who had the ability to bend light around herself, which had resulted in Switch being temporarily blinded at the start of the fight. She'll do nicely, she thought as the ground rushed up to meet her. Engaging her quirk, she instantly found herself beneath the shade of the trees, safe from the grip of Froppy's tongue. Turning around to savor the sight of friend striking down friend, she was promptly greeted with a floating tree branch to the face, knocking her flat on her back and dislodging a couple of teeth. What? She slurred, unable to understand what had just happened. Switch realized she hadn't heard the sound of a body hitting the earth, nor was there a cry of pain that resulted from a broken hero. There was only the sound of distant explosions in the background while she was quickly surrounded by 3 heroines. Where's the invisible one? She wondered blearily. I saw her clothes, so I should have been able to switch with her. You fell for a little trap, hook, line, and sinker, said Ashley Queen as she planted her boot on the chest of the defeated villain with a hard look on her face. We figured you'd try to get us to attack each other again, so we used a little sleight of hand to get you to go after a dummy target. You thought you were switching places with me, but all you got was my glove, which your gravity made float, so it only looked like I was there, said the disembodied voice of the stealth heroine, looking from somewhere to Switch's right, next to Aravity, who had just tossed aside the thick tree branch that had collided with her opponent's skull. The only thing Sue could have hurt that way was an empty piece of clothing, while you teleported right into the line of fire. You heroes really are stupid, Switch said through a mangled smile, blood running from her busted lip and broken teeth. Her eyes flicked over to a distant boulder that rested on the beach, barely visible from where they were, but it would be enough. That's always a given, with the pretty ones. Before she could teleport, however, a pink hand clamped down over her eyes, preventing the use of her quirk, much to her frustration. At least we're not dumb enough to monologue before making an escape, Ashley Queen said in a cold voice that gave her friends pause. And don't dream of getting away again. Acid gushed out of her hand, eating away at the soft tissue of the villain's face and scorching her eyeballs to render them permanently useless. The smell of burning flesh and a piercing scream assaulted the ears of the heroines as they bore witness to the wrath of a woman who has watched her lover come close to death one time too many. What's the status of Team Ruby? Kai asked pensively as he kept his eyes trained on the scorched part of the forest that had suddenly appeared a minute ago. I can't really tell, Creati panted, her body exhausted after overusing her power. I don't see them or the villain. We should go help them out, Tailman said, but he was stopped by Tentacle. We can't, the beefy hero said dully. Remember, our job is to protect Katsuma and Mahiro. The 2 kids of whom he spoke continued to watch the battle below them unfold, their eyes widening as it drew ever closer to their location. Kai grit his teeth before he spat blood on the ground and took a step up onto the wall in front of them. Balls to that, he growled as he watched Nine's lasers cut at Deku's body and destroy Ground Zero's gauntlet simultaneously. They need me. No. Kai was startled to feel Creati's hand wrap around his forearm with a surprising amount of strength, given her weak constitution at the moment. You won't accomplish anything other than giving these villains another chance to kill you. You don't know that. You just spit up more blood. Your injuries aren't done healing. I don't care, he said as he yanked his arm away angrily. I won't die. I know what my limits are. Dude, you're not going, Tailman said as he grabbed his friend by the shoulder and pulled him away from the wall to face him. Don't make me knock you out. Kai regarded the normally passive boy shrewdly, trying to determine if he was bluffing. After a few seconds, he nodded slowly, knowing that even if Tailman didn't make good on that promise, Tentacle would. 9 was just about to skewer Ground Zero with a direct laser to the chest when he felt something strong wrap around his arm and yank it off course. He looked up in surprise to see Cellophane zooming toward him, a fierce look in his eye. You better think again, he shouted as he aimed his foot to connect with the villain's face. 9 responded quickly, repelling the boy with a shield and an air burst, followed by a series of violet lasers that left the taping hero a beaten mess on the ground near one of the walls that led up the temple ruins. Ground Zero saw this, his eyes widening in shock. Zero? He cried out when the other boy didn't move. 9 was about to target him again when he was forced to block a thunderous sound wave from behind him. glaring over his shoulder to see Earphone Jack using her boots to amplify her heartbeats into sonic pulses one more. With a flick of his fingertips, he destroyed her boots and severely injured her legs with another laser burst, causing her to scream in pain as she fell to the ground. "Jiro, no!" All Might's heir shouted. "Keep on him, Deku!" yelled another familiar voice, a flash of pink entering the fray. Ashley Queen skated forward at high speed, lashing out with ropes of acid that Nine had to guard against for fear of being dissolved. From the looks of the substance striking the ground near his shields, it seemed that the melting heroine wasn't messing around. When the villain tried to blast her, she conjured an acid veil potent enough to absorb the lasers and nullify their effects, while Invisible Girl and Froppy moved to rescue Cellophane and Earphone Jack. "Wait, where's Ochako?" Deku wondered when he noticed his girlfriend missing from their number. "What happened to the villain they were fighting? Did they beat her or did she get away?" "Teleporter's been dealt with," Ashley Queen told him as if she had heard his thoughts. "We've restrained her away from the civilians." "It's about time," Ground Zero shouted as he sped alongside her, both of them using their quirks to close in on the multi-quirked villain. Unseen by their enemy, Uravity flew at him from behind, intent on striking him with her hands to make him float, which she hoped would at least disorient him and give her friends an advantage. Spectral blue dragons suddenly burst out of the villain's body, snatching up Uravity and Ashley Queen in their jaws. Ground Zero managed to avoid the third dragon, but was still forced to retreat. The monster shook the girls a couple of times and then spit them out, blood flying from their bodies as they hurtled toward the ground. "Ochako!" Deku cried out as he leaped up high and caught his girlfriend up in his arms, bridal style. "I'm okay, Deku," she mumbled before passing out. On the other side of the fight, Ground Zero had managed to catch up Ashley Queen and safely deposit her on the ground before glaring over his shoulder. The green-haired hero set his girlfriend down as gently as he could before whirling around, rage to match Bakugo's in his eyes. "You'll pay for that!" he shouted as he poured more power into his tired muscles, ignoring the limit he had worked to maintain thus far. "Full cowling! 40%!" Lightning sizzled the air around him as he rocketed forward, a slipstream of violent winds trailing behind him while he smashed through the dragons with barely a thought, his only goal being the villain who had hurt his friend so badly. Ground Zero took a moment to be surprised by the new level of anger being displayed by his rival before he sensed another disturbance in the air, coming from further up the mountain. Light that blazed like a miniature star was coming from where they had stationed the escape team, which could only mean one thing. "Don't tell me." After seeing his girlfriend get snatched up by the dragon quirk, Kai finally snapped. Tailman tried to move to restrain him, having seen the same thing and knowing what was probably about to happen. He was swiftly jabbed in the stomach, cutting off his words before pure power flooded the air around Kai, who was now standing atop the wall in front of him. "I won't go down," he growled as his throat glowed blue and he glared down at Nine, who was trying to hold back an enraged Deku with his shields, only this time he seemed to be losing ground. "But this guy just made his last mistake." Drawing in a deep breath that was exhaled both a trickle of blood that leaked out of the corner of his mouth, he then added, "Let my wrath be made manifest. True speech." Blinding light flared all around him, preventing the others from even looking directly at him and causing Katsuma and Mahiro to cower in fear of his might, even though it wasn't directed at them. "Nine-Tails Kurama!" This was not a technique he had practiced before, only conceptualized. Even without having any practice with it, the sheer size and fine control he would need to utilize such a creation properly would be monumentally exhausting, even for his vast reserves of power and impressive mental fortitude. None of that mattered to Kai, though. Mina had been hurt, and he had just been standing there, letting his friends do all the fighting when he could have been helping them. He could have helped her. He bared his teeth and let out a wordless roar as he declared his intent to all within earshot from within the shifting mass of light that he was now bending to his will. "This bastard can curl up and die for all I care." Tailman and Tentacle reacted only just in time to shove the kids and Create out of the way as a behemoth arose from within the harsh blue glow. 9 massive tail-like appendages shot out from where Kai had stood, streaking through the air to strike at his enemy down below with a savage intent. The earth shook where each tail landed, even when the villain managed to put up a shield between him and the new source of danger. As 6 of the glowing blue limbs continued to rain down brutal blows against the heroes' enemy, 3 of them moved to envelop the heroes who had been scattered by the field of battle, and bring them up to gently deposit them next to an awestruck Creatia and her friends. Kai stood above them inside the head of a translucent, giant fox-like monster that bared its fangs as he raged at 9 from within his created avatar. The fox itself stood at 3 stories tall, and that was crouching down. If Kai had a mind to make it stand on its powerful-looking hind legs, it would have towered over a good number of buildings in Tokyo. Everything about it bespoke destruction and wrath, all of which Kai was now bringing to bear on the enemy who had hurt his loved ones. How powerful is he to be able to fight like that with that kind of injury? Kurede could only wonder. At first glance, he seemed to be lashing out without any rhyme or reason to his attacks, but Tentacle quickly noticed that in spite of the speed and ferocity in which Kai was directing the nine tails, none of them were close to striking Deku or Ground Zero, who, after a moment of being surprised and adjusting to this new set of circumstances, used their razor-sharp reflexes to fall into a new pattern of attack, giving Nine almost no time to react, let alone come up with a strategy to get him out of this predicament. Even the dragon projections that he could send out of his body were decimated by the power of Kai's newest conjuring. Still, in spite of him hardly being able to counterattack, Nine wasn't giving ground either, and Kai could only last so long. He could feel his chest tightening as his breathing became more laborious, and he realized that even if he wasn't flexing his physical muscles, the sheer amount of raw energy that his quirk generated was indeed putting stress on his damaged body all the same. This attack or bust, he decided, even as his ethereal beast opened its mouth wide, bearing its fearsome incisors down at Nine. True speech, he growled, ignoring the soreness in his throat that came from overusing this particular chakra ability, and watching a huge ball of condensed energon form in front of his body / Kurtama's head. All 9 of his tails slammed down around Nine, shutting him away from the rest of the world and leaving Kai with a clear line of sight that would not allow for a miss. Tailed Beast Bomb! Even as the projectile shot toward Nine at breakneck speed, Kai noticed a movement behind him in his peripheral vision. It was the last thing he saw before something heavy struck him in the head and sent him into the waiting embrace of unconsciousness. What do you mean you don't know? Firecracker demanded of her sister while the fires of the beast raged above them. We fought monsters with quirks back home. Why is this guy any different? Those monsters didn't have the intelligence of a human mind, Gamble Shroud said to placate their hot-tempered teammate. This guy can think, strategize. Can he? Mirtanaster asked as balls of plasma started shooting over their heads, seemingly at random. It doesn't seem like he's trying to hit us specifically. Maybe his power-up comes at the cost of his intelligence? The shrouded heroine asked. Maybe, Crescent Rose muttered as she examined the haphazard destruction around them. He might also trying to flush us out. I wish Midoriya were here. He'd know how to counter this guy's moves. Well, we've got to do something before he decides to go after our friends, whether or not he's in his right mind, Mirtanaster told their leader. Come on, Ruby. You're a faster thinker than Midoriya, and in my mind, you fight better than he does too. You've led us to victories without his help before, and it's time for you to do it again. You're Crescent Rose, the youngest and bravest heroine to make it into Second Amendment, and that's not for no reason. You took on the Yakuza and lived to tell about it, so show us why you're in Mr. Aizawa's class, of all places in the world. Crescent Rose regarded her partner for a few seconds before a familiar spark appeared in her silver eyes, along with a confident smirk that they hadn't seen in some time. You guys remember the Nevermore? She asked them, prompting grins from all of her friends. Now that's more like it, her sister said as she ruffled her hair. Less than a minute later, Mirtanaster and Gamble Shroud were standing with their weapons drawn in front of Chimera, who regarded them with a predatory growl of malice. The black-haired girl was the first to spring into action, creating several shadow clones that divided his attention and causing him to spit several balls of plasma at them, as opposed to the concentrated beam he had been using. At the same time, Mirtanaster conjured over 24 hexes around their opponent before springing onto the closest one and streaking through the air to slash at Chimera's snout, scoring a shallow blow that enraged the beast. She landed on one of her airborne hexes and used it to ricochet toward another, just out of the range of his massive claws. She repeated this process, working the monster up into a frenzy as he tried in vain to keep up with the slender girl's superior speed. Of course, if he did manage to get a hit on her, she would snap like a toothpick, and that would be it for her. Just as the last of her hexes faded from around the monster, she darted away, leaving room for Firecracker to charge in and meet Chimera's fist with a punch of her own. She grunted in pain as the direct contact causes her knuckle bones to fracture, while her knees buckled from the impact. None of this would stop her, though. With blazing red eyes and blonde hair aflame, she swung her left fist toward the beast's stomach, shouting, Sun Dragon Fist! The punch contained all the kinetic force of Chimera's last attack, combined with the power of every other blow that Firecracker had absorbed into her body since the fight had begun, and then doubled by the strength of her own quirk. The result sent the heavy man flying through the air, a sensation he had not experienced in years, not since he was younger than the girls were now. He heard a high-pitched war cry, followed by the sound of sniper fire, announcing the presence of Crescent Rose. She was launched toward the beast by the power of Mirtanaster's Black Hex, adding to the speed of her own quirk and the recoil force of her weapon's gunfire. All these factors combined to make the girl fast enough to compete with the speed of sound, as she let the massive blade of her scythe trail behind her until it collided with Chimera's neck in midair. There was a brief moment of resistance from his thick fur and muscular physique, but in the end, the scythe cut through and separated the beast's head from his shoulders. The huge body crashed onto the forest floor amid the flames that Chimera had created, while Crescent Rose flew further out, her momentum too great to simply stop as she wished. It wasn't until she was out near the ocean that she was finally able to crash to the ground with a more or less safe landing. Exhausted by all their efforts and now able to see that their leader was safe on the beach below them, the other individual members of Team Ruby collapsed to the ground wherever they were, each of them hoping that their friends were having better success than they had. Deku and Ground Zero kept a wary eye on where they had seen Nine caught up in a massive blast of energon, cautious of what the villain might throw at them next. Kai had clearly meant to assist them, in spite of his orders to stay back, but now it was just a question of whether or not his gambit had paid off. That move just now was amazing, but I hope he didn't overdo it, Deku thought, as the blue trails of energy dissipated before their eyes and the dust in the air began to settle, revealing Nine. Is he? The man clutched at his head and screamed in pain as the shield he had used to protect himself shattered around his body. Yes! Deku cried while Ground Zero grinned in satisfaction. He reached his limit! He had dropped back to his 25% cap off, and he thought that his arms and legs might have some bruised bones, but he could still stand and fight. The damn Glory Hog actually did it, the explosive hero admitted begrudgingly. Let's not waste the opening he gave us, grunted a familiar voice as the owner skated by them, much to their surprise. Ashley Queen sped toward Nine from above, who was stumbling about as if drunk. Ashido? How are you still standing? Deku asked as the two boys raced after her. When that thing grabbed me, I was able to melt the jaw, so the only damage I took was when he shook us up, she answered over her shoulder. Made me feel kind of sick, but I'm fine to join back in. Froppy and the others have gone to take care of our wounded, so don't worry about them. She was clearly torn, no doubt wanting to go and make sure that Kai hadn't pushed himself so hard he would need a hospital right away again, but knowing that the fight was not yet over. To her credit, she remained a hero in that hour of need, setting aside her personal feelings and moving in alongside her classmates. Let's finish it! Ground Zero shouted as they closed in on their enemy. There was an ominous rumbling in the air while the sun darkened that made the three heroes skid to a stop and turn their gazes skyward, whereupon each of them paled. Nine discarded his mask to reveal his face, which was partially covered in what looked like cracks made of purple light, same as the lasers that he could shoot from his fingertips. His eyes glowed red and he reached up to the heavens, which were now obscured by the eye of a monstrous storm that had covered the entire island in a matter of seconds. Lightning crackled along the swirling maelstrom, congealing above their heads and a clear indication of what was about to happen to the heroes who had pushed the villain too far. The next second, the four of them were consumed in a brilliant flash of light and deafening sound that shook the Temple Island and leaving the onlookers to wonder what had become of their friends. Katsuma and Maharo were trembling as they tried to see through the smoke and dust that remained after Nine's brutal attack. The little boy was trying desperately to heal Kai, following Tentacle's knockout punch, hoping that maybe if he pushed himself, he could seal up the hero's leaking lung and get him back in the fight he was so desperate to be a part of. What happened? He asked when none of the heroes spoke. When all they did was turn and look at one another with grim faces, the two children let out wails of desperation and fright, only to find themselves wrapped up in the strong grip of Tentacle. You gotta get them out of here, Tailman told his classmate. They had seen Nine emerge from the dust cloud without any sign of their friends, which meant that they had to assume the worst. We'll hold him off for as long as we can, Creator said tiredly as she made a pair of grenades that she had just managed to make. Go, please. You can count on me, the tall hero said as he turned and started to run for the escape route that the heroes had managed to work out. Creator and Tailman checked to make sure that all their wounded allies were hidden as well as they could be under the circumstances before running off toward the bridge where they could see the villain slowly walking. He may have been able to summon a storm to strike down the heroes right in front of him, but it was clear that such an effort had cost him. We might be able to make the final push, Tailman thought as he flew through the air following a high jump, aiming for the part of the bridge that Nine had just passed. At the same time, Creaty hurled her grenades, timing the throw so that they exploded in front of the villain, destroying the bridge's support while Tailman's twirling tail dance broke the bridge behind him, sending Nine plunging down the mountainside to an almost certain death. Just as they were about to celebrate their hard-won victory, 2 dragons erupted from the shadow of the destroyed bridge and crashed into each of them, giving Nine an anchor to pull himself up and over the edge of the wall that had shielded the heroes and children from his field of vision until then. The man knew his time was running out, so there was no point in pacing himself anymore. The second that he had Tentacle in his sights, he opened fire with his lasers, striking the muscular hero multiple times as he shielded the 2 children with his body. "Go!" The 6-armed young man grunted to the 2 children, who were frozen with terror. "Don't look back!" Nine was about to finish him off when a blast of ice sheeted toward him, forcing him to put up a shield between him and a still-wounded Shoto, who was so tired he couldn't even tell the children to run. It was all he could do to attack the villain and buy time for their escape. At the same time, Tailman soared in from above, having recovered from the dragon head attack and intent on delivering a blow straight to the enemy this time. Froppy lunged out from behind a pile of rocks where she had managed to hide a few of her wounded classmates, her tongue reaching out to strike a solid blow to Nine's head. Tentacle even found it in himself to get to his feet and charge at their enemy in tandem with his friends, sprouting another set of extra limbs to aid in his attack. Nine grunted before repelling them with electric-riddled shields, finally beating the last of the fight out of the heroes. He could barely walk at this point, but he still shuffled toward the children, determined to reach the dream that was within his grasp. Both kids were sobbing, having lost every line of defense between themselves and the man determined to take Katsuma's power. They both knew that they could expect no mercy from him at this point. The heroes had angered him one time too many, and now he would probably kill them all, regardless of anything he had said beforehand. Knowing this, Maharu only saw one course of action to take. If this villain got her brother's power, he would become an unstoppable force of evil that could destroy the world they had grown up in, the world that all the heroes around them had fought to preserve. She couldn't let their sacrifices be in vain, and more than that, she couldn't have let the man hurt her little brother. So she stood up, and without looking back at her crying sibling, said, "Keep running, Katsuma." "No, don't," he begged her as she ran at Nine, determined to do what she could to keep him away from the boy. "Go away!" she shouted at the struggling villain, whose face was decorated by even more purple cracks than before, a likely sign that his body was close to bursting from the force of his overused powers. It still wasn't enough to make him turn back, so Maharu continued to yell, "Don't you come any closer to my brother!" Nine glared down at her before his left hand shot out and wrapped around her throat, choking her and holding her up to his shoulder height as he reaffixed his gaze on Katsuma, who could only tremble and cry as he watched the villain begin to strangle the life out of his sister. "Unless you want your sister to die right now," Nine growled in a voice as ominous as the thunder above them, "you'll get over here." "No," Maharu managed to squeak out past the grip on her windpipe. "Run away! Escape!" When you're facing off against a tough opponent, it's not your own strength that matters. Kai's words echoed in Katsuma's mind at that moment, causing him to stand up with a new resolve burning in his trembling heart. Standing up to them is the important part. "No!" he shouted as loud as he could, his body moving of its own accord, carrying him with his fists raised toward the man who was hurting his sister. "I can't just run away," he continued to cry. "I promise I will protect you, Maharu!" "If my quirk has to be taken so that he forgets about her, then he can have it," he thought as he watched Nine toss Maharu away like a broken toy and reach out to grab his head. Katsuma shut his eyes as he felt Nine's grip begin to enclose around his skull, getting ready for his sacrifice to be played out to the fullest extent. "Get lost!" The shout was accompanied by a metal fist slamming into Nine's left kidney, sending him flying away from the 2 kids and allowing Katsuma to open his eyes and see Kai standing where the villain had been, a fierce look in his gaze as he watched their enemy hit the dirt and roll multiple times. Behind him, Acid Queen skated onto the scene just in time to catch up Maharu before she even hit the ground. "Mr. Kai?" Katsuma asked, unsure if his eyes were playing tricks on him. "It was brave of you," the hero answered as he grinned down at the boy. "You did it real good, protecting your sister from him." "How are—" "Your quirk worked enough to revive me and patch up my insides a little better again," the guardian hero answered as he reached down and activated his sword, the yellow blade lighting up the darkness around them. "I'm in it to win it now." He turned to look directly at the recovering villain again while adding, "Take your sister and get out of here. Things are about to get real loud." Right." As the little boy went to retrieve his sister from where Acid Queen had set her down, the heroine herself jogged over to stand by her boyfriend with a grim look on her face. "Not gonna fight, huh?" she asked him as Nine finally staggered to his feet, his face twisted in agony. "Can't be helped," he replied as he used his giving heart to send some of his energy pulsing into her body through his hand. "Let's wrap this up fast, before I really do go past my limits." "No arguments here. She nodded before they both charged at 9. "But if I think you're overdoing it, I'm getting you out of here." "Understood." Kai was grinning as they ran. He trusted that she was the best judge of when he needed to be stopped, and that unlike his other classmates, if she told him to leave, he would. He was going to have some words for Shoji and Ojiro later for that crack they had given him over the head once this was all done, but he had more important things to worry about at the moment. Before 9 could even put up a shield between them, he was struck by another powerful punch to his back, followed by a raging explosion that knocked him dangerously close to a cliff, then went down for several hundred feet. He looked up, his teeth grinding as he saw Deku and Ground Zero joining the fray, both of them looking none the worse for the storm they had just weathered. "How could you possibly have avoided my lightning?" The villain grunted as he barely managed to conjure a shield to block a double punch from Kai and Deku, though they could immediately tell it was weaker than the others he had made. "You stopped us with that before!" Deku grunted as they broke through the shield, sending 9 backpedaling. "So we planned for it, and used that idiot Kaminari as a lightning rod!" Ground Zero shouted as he and Acid Queen zipped past their comrades, both their powers at the ready in their hands. Sure enough, down below in the area where 9 thought he had defeated them, a single hero could be seen, sparks dancing along his stiff body as he babbled some nonsense or other. Raging at the fact that mere children had once again stood between him and his goal, 9 unleashed as many lasers as he could at them. Acid Queen completely neutralized them with her powered-up acid veil, while her explosive teammate took care of the outliers with his autocannon. Kai and Deku reacted the instant the Blue Dragon specters appeared, All Might's air kicking them in half while his friend's blade slashed through the monster like a hot knife through butter. Ground Zero then propelled himself forward and barreled toward 9 with his explosive speed, and culminated the attack run with a fireball that launched their enemy out into open air. As if that wasn't enough, Deku, Bakugo, and Mina were all surprised to see 9 slam into a massive boulder that was simply floating in the air above them. Not bothering to wait for the surprise to wear off, as the stunned villain flopped onto another floating rock with hardly a sound, Kai leaped out in front of them, his throat glowing cyan as he shouted, "True speech! Primed Hellzone Grenade!" Now the boulder, and several thousand pounds of additional rocks that the others could now see above them, suddenly found themselves rigged with multiple glowing orbs, which had yet to explode, but the other students had a feeling they were about to be in for a show. It was confirmed when Kai called over his shoulder, "We ready?" "We are now," Gravity shouted as she ran up to the group, blood lining her brow, but determination in her green eyes as she prepared to disengage her quirk.
Kai-Gravity combo. Planetary devastation!
The two of them cried out together as the orbs exploded, sending the tons of rubble hurtling toward their enemy, burying him in a massive, rough sphere made of solid rock before Ochako released her hold on them, allowing the huge makeshift prison to drop out of sight, shaking the ground that it made contact with down below. The 5 students all leaned over to watch the sphere continue its downward journey, Kai and Bakugo grinning confidently while the others tried to recover their collective breaths. "How'd you get up to help us?" Deku asked his girlfriend, who was helping him to stay steady on his feet amid the fire and smoke. "Katsuma revived Kurai, and when I was put by him when Sue had to hide some of us away from that guy, he gave me some of his power to replenish my stamina and get the trap ready," the girl explained rapidly. "Pretty fast moves." Acid Queen grinned tiredly as she moved toward her own boyfriend. "I can already see the headline. Team Lightning Drop takes down its first baddie in an exotic locale." "Yeah, right," Bakugo snorted. "Pink Cheeks and Sandman only finished him off because I softened him up for you losers." "Regardless of who gets the official win, ladies and gentlemen, that is how you split a banana." Kai chuckled as he wiped at his mouth with the back of his hand. Before his girlfriend could point out the traces of red on his skin, the storm above them rumbled with an even greater intensity, giving them all a new sense of foreboding. You gotta be kidding me." A new tornado shot up to life, carrying a glaring 9 up above them, his white coat gone to reveal the remains of some body armor and what looked like a life support system. He was burned, battered, and bleeding, but he did not look as though he was someone ready to give up, not by a long shot. Purple cracks were running all across his body, but the energy of the same color was now pouring out of his back, indicating that any limitations he had been under were now likely gone. He also seemed to be in less pain than he was angry with them, which meant nothing good. The flames which had been consuming the area were suddenly sucked into the massive vertical funnel from which they could barely see their enemy through the gaps. The 5 heroes could hardly stand up, but they knew that if they lost their footing, things would go from worse to calamitous. "A fire tornado?" Acid Queen yelled to be heard above the raging storms. "Looks like he can control all types of weather," Ground Zero shouted back. All across the island, lightning was turning boulders into pebbles and setting fire to the trees that remained. The amount of destruction was overwhelming to comprehend, and it showed no signs of slowing down. "How much has this guy been having to hold back?" Deku wondered as the tornado continued to advance on them. Guys, the kids are still here, Aravati warned them as she looked over her shoulder. There's too much wind for them to be able to risk moving. Kurai felt it with certainty now. He was about to die right then and there on Nabu Island. He could feel that it was getting harder to breathe, and it wasn't just because of the smoke and fire in the air. He hadn't lied to Katsuma when he said that his insides had been patched up a little better, but he had been hoping to disguise the minimal margin of his recovery. He hoped that no one else had noticed the blood he'd been forced to expel from his mouth onto his hand, but he once again had far bigger things to worry about right then. I'm sorry, my promise turned out to be a lie, Mina. He thought morosely, though he did his best not to let it show. But if you died to this guy, and I didn't stand up to take the fall in your place, I'd never be able to forgive myself. He was glad then that he had made the preparations that he had. I guess it was always my destiny to die in battle, he thought as he registered the familiar sensation of a chakra point being cleansed, atop his head this time. What remains to be seen is if I can manage a hero's death with a quirk that I never should have possessed in the first place. He had finally unlocked all 7 chakra pools. It was only fitting that such an occasion come about in time for him to begin his final battle. It'll all be okay, he thought as a strange sense of peace settled in his heart and mind. It's time for the last of all for one's foul experiments to be put to rest. This isn't over, Kai suddenly shouted with great defiance, much to the amazement of his comrades. We'll see our duty done, villain. You're not getting Katsuma's quirk, and no one is going to die by your hand. They couldn't tell if it was the firelight all around them, but it looked like something in his body might have been changing. That and his sudden confidence in spite of the circumstances lent itself to the thought that he had one last trick up his sleeve. Let's do this, Ground Zero shouted to his peers as hands began to ignite rapidly. We gotta finish up and blast him with everything we got! No holding back, Deku agreed, red veins of energy crawling across his body as he prepared to fire off one for all at 100% from his left arm. This is it! Gravity screamed above the flames while digging her fingers into the soil beneath her, causing a new tremor to run through it, and huge cracks to appear around them. Him or us? Acid Queen cried, her eyes flaring green as she too summoned the last of the power that Kai had given her. All 5 of them moved, prepared to make the final push and put this villain down for good. There would be no restraint afforded to hero or villain. This had become a death match, plain and simple. One for all, 100%! Deku let out a raw-throated war cry as he shot toward Nine's tornado, his left fist crashing into the wall of flame as he cried, Detroit Smash! Ground Zero built up his own tornado of smoke and fire around himself as he crashed into the freak weather, roaring. Howitzer! Impact! Fallen Star! Gravity heaved every muscle in her body and tore a chunk of earth the size of the city block from in front of her into the air. The second that it started to get pulled into the fiery cyclone, she pressed her fingers together and released her hold on it, allowing gravity to take its natural course. Acid Storm! Acid Queen yelled as she unleashed massive amounts of acid in a horizontal funnel formation at the base of the tornado, hoping to douse the flames within it by thoroughly smothering the plasma. Lastly, Kai shot into the air and remained hovering in place as violet fire coated his body, his hair matching his flames while his eyes shifted into a deep purple shade that matched his brother's while he glared down at Nine, energy surging and dancing all around him in a fearsome display of power. Baryon mode. He thought it took a half second to marvel at the fact that he was flying on his own power, and that his energy output had skyrocketed exponentially. The full might of the sun is mine to command, and my acceptance of this cursed gift is the core of this power. Violet starlight scorched the air above the temple ruins, forcing anyone who could bear to watch the tremendous battle to look away from him. His muscles quivered with power, letting him know it wasn't just his projections that were being amplified. His physical strength was also being taken to levels to rival his joyous light ability. Final form, much. Firming up his chin, he drew in as deep a breath as his abused lungs would allow him, and prepared for his last stand. I am the son of Moka and Shigeru Hogosha, he declared to both his enemy and himself. If he was about to die, his enemy would know what name to curse as he rotted in hell. The guardian hero, Kai! If I lived by a motto, I guess I should be ready to die by it too. He mused as he placed his hands against one another, a lavender ball of pure power condensing in front of his palms as lightning sparked across his body. I'll stand my ground, and die as a hero. One last time. He breathed out, more scarlet spilling from his lips as his lungs burned, desperate for fresh air. I'll go plus ultra final flash! A purple-white laser of massive proportions shot down from above, striking into the tornado where he had last seen Nine, causing the wind funnel to shift in place for a second, seemingly starting to give from the force of the 5 heroes who were standing against its master. Then Deku's arm broke and he recoiled in agony. Chains of lightning and dragons tore apart the piece of the earth that Uravity had hurled and scattered the rubble to the violent winds. Ground Zero's explosion failed to break through the wall of fire, and Acid Queen's attack only snuffed out a small portion of the plasma before the cyclone reignited itself and burned her acid away. Even Kai's huge laser failed to reach the villain hiding in the storm. The winds then resumed their vicious cycle with greater intensity, not only knocking the heroes down, but also drawing them into the awful heat of the fire, whirling them around and around for what felt like an eternity. Bones were broken, cuts were open, flesh was scorched, and breath was stolen. When at long last Nine let up, the heroes were dumped unceremoniously on the heated ground amid the scattered flames, and allowing the villain to walk on the earth with more confidence than before. Deku was among the first to recover, struggling to get to his feet in spite of his broken arm as he grunted. It wasn't enough? All of that? And nothing? Ground Zero was also getting up, his teeth bared in a helpless snarl as it began to dawn on him that even with their class's heaviest hitters working together, they just didn't have the power that they needed to defeat this new version of All for One. This isn't possible. Uravity groaned before she collapsed face first into the earth, utterly spent. Acid Queen looked up through bloodied eyes to see Kai, who was gasping for breath as he lay awkwardly on the ground, whatever new power he had unleashed dissipating from his body. She realized he was choking on his own blood when he coughed up scarlet, so she scrabbled to get to him and help him into a sitting position. You idiot, she said as tears began to fall down her face. You were supposed to stay back, stay safe. Why can't you learn other people fight for you? There was so much blood, Acid Queen thought as her battered body shook with pain and fear. It was dribbling from Kai's mouth, streaming from his nose, oozing out of his ear, and pouring from his reopened stab wound, plus a dozen other injuries he had now accumulated. Almost anyone else would have already died from shock if not the blood loss, but her hero was stubbornly clinging to life, determined to see the fight through to the very end. As she helped him sit up, he spat out crimson and only then was able to take in a sharp, pained breath. It's not in my nature to let others take the hit when I get to it instead. He gasped, barely audible above the sounds of the storm. I'm sorry, Mina. I just wanted to be a hero you could be proud of. Please, forgive me for being so selfish. Stop talking like that, she begged him as his eyes met hers. You're gonna be fine. Reinforcements will be here soon, okay? We're gonna be okay. It's no use. Nine's voice drew their attention to the man, awash in purple energy as he strode forward with purpose. When Deku and Ground Zero tried to move at him again, he blasted them with lasers so they fell over backwards. You simply don't have the power necessary to defeat me. You would not survive the new world I will create. What new world? Kai grunted as he tried to stand, only to be torn from his girlfriend's grasp by a burst of wind. He was slammed into a boulder with a cry of pain, more blood flying from his body as the pressure in his chest intensified. One ruled by power, Nine answered as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. The strong will lord over the weak in my utopia. Labels like hero and villain won't be necessary. Same old crap, Ground Zero shouted defiantly. In response, Nine conjured 2 more dragon heads that snatched him and Acid Queen up in one bite, while Deku and Kai were swept up in the other. In a true superhuman society, power should be the only factor that matters, the villain continued as if nothing had happened. That is the world I will create. Deku let out a grunt from the jaws of the dragon head and shouted back, Sounds like something only a power-hungry madman would come up with. That's never gonna work, moron! Ground Zero added, trying in vain to blast his way free of the maw trapping him and Acid Queen, but only being able to make weak sparks from his battered hands. The girl was unconscious, having been struck in the head by a passing rock after the dragon heads had snatched them all up. Nine shrugged and then willed his monsters to begin biting down harder, threatening to rend the 4 teenagers into pieces. If you insist on standing in my way, You'll have to be eliminated, he told them. Deku and Ground Zero grit their teeth as the pressure on their chests began to increase, but it was much worse for Kai, who was fully choking on the dark red liquid that had filled his throat and was continuing to leak out of his ears. Spots danced in front of his eyes and his vision started to swim in and out as he struggled in vain to even take a breath. Why am I even fighting anymore? He wondered as he felt his eyes begin to close. I'm about to die anyway. And in the end, did I even make a difference? He had finally been able to use all of his power, the infinite strength of a star itself, and for what? He was on death's door once again, and this time, there would be no one who could save him. It was over. They had lost. His eyes flicked back open, almost of their own accord, as he heard Deku grunting next to him, saying, I'll figure something out, Kurai. I won't let it end here. He was surprised to see that his friend was trying desperately to work his arm between the teeth of the dragon that held them prisoner, trying to alleviate the pressure for his dying friend. He wasn't attempting to get himself out of what could be a fatal trap. He only cared about the person he could reach out to and save right then. If I can fight, Kai thought as he clenched his robotic arm, which had been pinned to his side by the creature's jaw. For the people beside us, the ones we can yet save, then I have to. He angrily slapped his flesh hand against the face of the dragon, putting as much force as he could into an energon blast that would free them, but only managing to conjure a slightly brighter explosion than what Ground Zero was making. Self-pity does nothing for any of us now. There is only our duty now. The responsibility of a hero. His sword had been lost in the tornado, so he couldn't cut his way out. If he was going to use his powers, brute force would have to do the job. Come on, he thought angrily as the spots in his vision continued to grow, threatening to blind him completely. I may be about to die, but that's no reason for me and the others to fall here too. Come on, Kai! He tried again for another blast, but it too was ineffective. Just as he thought of trying to take a shot at the villain directly, a high-pitched cry reached his ears from among the flames and scorched rocks. Mr. Deku! Kai! We believe in you! Katsuma shouted out to them. His sister added her voice to his as they yelled, Please don't give up! The three heroes looked down at the two children, who were tending to Shoji and Todoroki, both of them with tears in their eyes, but also something else. There was a desperate, unreasoning hope in their bearing, but it was all that they had left. We can't let that hope go unanswered, Kai thought as he bunched his fist, preparing to give it one last effort for the sake of the innocent children and his best friends in all the world. 9 began to advance on the two kids, having also heard their voices, and knowing that at long last, with no one to stand in his way, his dream was about to be made into a reality. Kai was about to gather his power and take a direct shot at 9 when he was suddenly stopped in place by Deku saying, Kurai, I got a crazy idea. He was wearing a strange little smile as he looked his best friend in the eyes and said, There's still one way we can stop him. Kai's eyes widened to the size of dinner plates as Deku reached out with his broken hand to him, blood dripping from his fingertips. All Might wasn't born with his power. He remembered his friend telling him after he had first learned of his secret. It was given to him by his master, who received it from another, who received it from the user before them, and so on. He gave me his quirk so that I could continue his work after his time as a hero has passed. And someday, when I find a worthy successor, it will be my turn to pass on the torch. Knowing what Izuku was up to, he shook his head negatively, unable to get the words that he wanted to speak out past the blood in his throat. I can't, he thought with a trace of panic. I won't be the reason that another hero lost their quirk. Please, could I? Deku begged him. Still, Kai refused to reach out his hand and accept what was being offered. There has to be another way, he thought desperately as his head felt like it was going to explode. Please, this is the only way to protect them, his friend insisted. It'll be okay. Our powers aren't what make us heroes. It'll be okay. Unbidden, Kai's memories of another hero who had been willing to lay down everything for the innocent party rose to the forefront of his mind. Togata, stripped of his quirk, had continued to be every bit the hero he had been unable to be in that moment, even with his own powers intact. Kai hasn't let you hurt Eri yet, and I am still Lemillion! He shut his eyes, trying to think of another way, any way, and being unable to see anything but the path now offered to him. This is the only way to stand against this guy, he conceded to himself before he opened his eyes and looked over to his friend, who was still straining to reach him. Even if he sacrifices his power, he will still be Deku, the greatest hero of our time. There is no other choice. Everything in his life had led Kodai to this moment. Every mistake, every good decision, the joys and sorrows, his losses and victories alike had all put him on the path to the crossroads before him. Both choices led to the grave, but only one would see him put to rest with honor and the satisfaction of knowing that he had fulfilled his duty. Slowly, painfully, hardly able to see or breathe, the guardian hero reached over and grabbed a hold of his destiny.
Even if they doubt me, push me where I stand, I will say it proudly, soon you know who I am. There is something that sleeps within you, listen close. You will soon know. Every door that is open for you, one is closed. Soon you will know what's on the other side.
Okay, so
All right, put down the pitchforks. I didn't actually say that he was going to die in this chapter.
it's coming.
I said he would die on Nabu Island. If it makes you feel better, he's going to die next chapter, I promise. He will die, he will stay dead.
Yeah, direct your anger at him. You guys know me. I've been waiting for him to publish these chapters for a long time because I've been waiting to see what you guys feel as well. So
Oh, man.
you don't know how many times I've tried to convince him, just like publish multiple chapters, bud.
Nope.
Come on, let's
Nope.
go. Let's
No,
polish them.
I have a schedule.
Crank them out.
No.
I know we got the
I had
structure.
to make sure that I got this right.
All right. Anyway, so we open and we just kind of jump right into the action.
Yeah. In the movie, it was like they go like straight from the planning to like, all right, let's kick butt, take names.
Yeah, which is really, in the movie, I loved the transition. It was really nice. And I think it's very My Hero, because I know a lot of shonen anime and just anime in general, we sit here and we plan, and then we stand here for 10 minutes talking while the fight's about to happen, which is annoying. And
They did the talking while like they were
Yeah.
doing the overlay of like, okay, this is what we're doing with the
Exactly.
citizens. This is how we're gonna set up our traps.
Exactly. So, but the plot keeps moving.
Yes.
And I love that about My Hero because most anime is not like that. My Hero, for the most part,
There's
does
a few where it's like, and it's mostly like when they're in their classes, where they'll be like taking a step back and like analyzing the fight.
Yeah, but it's not during the fight, which I really appreciate because that is something that really annoys me about anime. Like, I love anime, but I can't do freaking Dragon Ball sometimes because the monologuing is out of control. And so I appreciate that about the original show, and I liked that we were able to just kind of get into it after a really long time of dialogue in the second half of that last chapter.
Yeah. So the artwork that that kind of comes up earlier on is a redraw of when I did the chapter where they were getting their provisional licenses, I drew Kurai and Todoroki doing a combo. I went ahead and redid that drawing for this here because I was like, they're about to do like a better version of that attack. I want to see if I can do a better version of that art piece, and I think it turned out pretty good. Yeah. I don't know if anybody noticed this, but if you pay real close attention, if you go back and look at that image, you can see that Todoroki's eyes in that are green. They're not. And I actually was really careful to make so like the brown eye, I gave it like a darker shade of green, and then the blue eye I made it lighter, so it's not exactly the same color of green either. Because originally I was just gonna do do the standard color green, but then I was like, no. I'm like, he's still got the half and half thing going. It's just one of those little things, but I really enjoyed like going back and modifying that.
Huh. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So I mean, it's a pretty consistent anime boss fight where you keep hitting him and you keep thinking he's gonna go down, but he doesn't quite go down, and they're slowly wearing him down, but they're not wearing him down quite enough. Was there anything that you really wanted to address, like in particular with the attacks or anything?
So Prominence Flash is a Dragon Ball reference.
Yes.
It's one of Vegeta's moves. Whenever he.
You know, I love my Vegeta.
Well, yeah. So whenever he does, so basically, whenever he's in the God form, instead of the final flash, it's technically called the Prominence Flash. So it's a reference. So it's a double reference. So for Kudai, it's a Dragon Ball reference. For Todoroki, you know, his father's ultimate move is called Prominence Burn. Kudai has the final flash attack. So put that together, you get Prominence Flash.
See, and
then there were a bunch of Naruto references that happened
my
too.
brain turned off at the first something smash flash, and it's very much like my fourth graders tell me the same thing. They'll be like, Mrs. Cram, did you see in the new Dragon Ball whatever? Like, and then he went to this form, and then he did this attack, and then he did this form, and he did this attack, and I'm just like, my brain's turned off, and I'm like, yeah. And I know I watched the episode, but I have zero recollection of what any of that means because I don't care about that. I just care about the story. So I'm just listening to all these details, and this cute little fourth grader, and then Mrs. Cram, and then he turned this color, and then blah, blah, blah. And I was like, this is like talking to a tiny Joseph. And I'm not getting a word of it, but I'm just going to smile and nod. Okay, sorry,
So
moving on.
Is that like how most of my conversations with you go whenever I'm explaining a new mechanic? You just smile away, boys.
Yes.
Smile away. Oh,
Yes.
that's so disheartening.
Sorry. You know me, I care about dialogue and the plot. And sometimes when you write an action scene that's really like
Yeah.
cinematic, I'll be like, oh, I get what's happening. That's cool. I don't always, because my brain just kind of turns off.
Fair enough.
You've seen me. I mean, the people in the Discord have seen me watching you play video games. I can't even keep track of what's going on if I'm watching. I just see lots of lights and moving things, and I can't quite catch. I have a visual processing disorder, and so it's just like all of that movement is very hard for me to picture. I have to slow down, and so when I'm hearing it verbally, it's even worse because I'm like, wait, how would I picture this? What's happening? So yeah, so I'm that reader.
Yeah.
When you see the video of the lady who's reading like a fantasy book, and she's like, and then we packed our bags, and me and went on the road with, and that's because that's how I read. I don't actually sound out the names.
Oh, man.
Anyway, continue.
No, that's fun. Yeah. So lots of Naruto references that happen throughout this chapter.
Oh yeah, I did catch that.
I spent a lot of time figuring out like what the teams were going to be altered into because you know I wanted the girls from Ruby to fight the Chimera villain because I thought that would look really cool.
Okay.
I loved the lineup in the movie. It was Todoroki, Ida, Sue, and Kirishima against the Chimera villain. But I was like, hey, they need 4 people to go fight some. I got a team right ready for that. So I decided to put them in, and then I was like, well, what do I do with those heroes that got shuffled around? And I decided to put Kirishima and Ida with Tokoyami because their quirks actually would work. Sorry, not Ida's quirk, not as much, but his armor makes him really difficult for the Slice villain to deal with.
Gotcha.
Because and he's really fast. You know, she'd have a hard time. So even if she could hit him, she wouldn't be able to do much more than like scratch his armor, like maybe put some holes in it. But it'd be very difficult for her to actually injure him. And then there's Kirishima, who's a living rock golem, who she just can't cut him.
And I have to say, the way they finally got her, I really thought was good.
Yes.
I liked that because, you know, just using the girls and oh gosh, I can never remember Invisible Girl's name.
Oh, you're talking about the Switch villain now.
That's what I thought.
No. I was talking about the one. You remember they fought underground? The girl with the one with the red hair. I was talking about Ida, Kirishima, and Tokoyami's fight.
See, and I was moving on to Switch. My bad.
No, that's okay. I left Tokoyami where he was because, like, you know, the no matter who he's fighting, the best
Dark
place.
Shadow.
The best place to put him in is in a dark cave because that's where he's gonna be at his most powerful.
Yes.
It doesn't matter who he's fighting.
Yeah.
So I left that one alone. I thought it was a fun team up for them to do. It made me it made me use my creative muscles a little bit more because I'm like, okay, how can these quirks work together? Like in that situation, most of the time Tokoyami has to kind of work by himself, so the other two kind of have to like tag in. But Kirishima and Ida working together is not really something we've seen a whole lot.
That's true.
And I kind of liked the idea of like Ida turning Kirishima into just a human missile.
Yeah.
And like just jumping up in the air, like using his quirk at max, so he rotates and then just chucks him.
It's curling.
Curling.
Human curling.
Human curling. Yeah. That's what he did. But then, yeah, you got Tsukuyomi to finish it off. But yeah, you wanted to talk about the switch fight.
Yeah, the switch fight. That's the one that I thought was.
I had to get
handled
real
pretty
creative
well.
with that one.
Yeah. So and again, I never
Because
remember.
like none of the heavy hitters were in that fight.
They had to really outsmart her. And see, that's the kind of scene that I appreciate because I love it when you have to think of a creative way instead of just punching things.
She took out their hardest puncher.
Yeah. Yeah, so clearly that's not the way to go with this person. So they had to outsmart her because she's a strategist. She thinks quickly, you know, in order to be able to.
She's not super powerful,
but
she's
no,
really clever.
Yeah, kind of like what we were talking about in the reviews. It's a simple quirk, but it's being utilized very well, which makes her powerful and scary.
You could say the same thing with Kirishima. It's a very simple quirk, but he's practiced with it and made it something really remarkable.
Yep. But yeah, the girls, I mean, they handle it really well.
Yep. I was like Mina has to be on that team
Oh, but the gloves floating because of
Hagakure's
quirk, that was brilliant. Loved it.
Yeah. I was like, all right, you want to play? Like, I actually came up with the way to beat her before I came up with the fight where she like basically kills Kodai.
Okay.
Because like I wanted to know how to beat her before I got into a fight where where she won, where her victory was guaranteed.
That's a smart way of writing. Oh,
because like I need to know what's going to beat somebody before I can write them into a fight where they can win, if that makes sense.
No, that makes sense. Because otherwise,
like a little reverse engineering kind of thing.
No, I like that. That makes a lot of sense because I thought that was well thought out there.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. And then so that left Shoto to be with the main group. I thought about and Yairozu's placement got changed. She was originally with Aoyama, but I honestly thought that like his super move was enough to like separate the villains. I didn't know that Yairozu like shooting cannons off was like necessary to further that. So like just for good measure, I had Kodai and Shoto do their thing. But I thought she would be more useful like with the rear guard.
Okay.
So that's why I moved her. And then, I had Shoto wasn't going to be fighting the Chimera villain, so it made sense to have him kind of be the heavy hitter that went against 9 first. I wish I'd had the time to like draw his Arctic Flash Solaris Wave move. Because I think that would have made for a really cool visual, but yeah. I just ran out of time. I couldn't make it. Maybe I'll go back and do that eventually, or maybe he'll use the move again later on in the series. And I'll have a better chance to draw it then. But yeah, the opening bit with him, Jiro, and Sero. I putting Jiro on the front lines might have been a little bit more of a questionable decision on my part and like the part of the class, but I think she's got quite a bit of grit, like more than a lot of people give her. I think she would do pretty, like her natural tendency is to like do reconnaissance and kind of hang back. But if you put her on the front lines, like she can make concussive sound waves out of her heartbeat.
Yeah.
Like that's not something to mess around with.
That's pretty impressive.
Like, yeah,
No,
she can rip up the ground just by putting her hands on it.
No, she's definitely one of my favorite female characters in the show, if not my favorite. Yeah. Honestly,
she's really cool.
I think if I had to pick a female character just in the show in general, she would be up there. Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, she was Daniel's first cartoon crush. So.
That's true. Well, she, I always find the pop punk alter egos and go for those ones, right? See, if we're in Star Wars, it's Sabine. I love Sabine, and here it's
Sabine and Jiro hanging out. What would that look like?
Oh, okay. We'll have to talk about that one another time. I like that.
That would be real. That would be real fun.
Oh, just lots of metal and painting nails black and giggling because they're secretly cinnamon rolls, even though they have that mean exterior. Okay.
I can get behind that. Okay.
Sparkly black nails. There we go. Sorry.
No, it's good. It's good. So obviously they're not enough because the plot has to happen. But Oh, what was I gonna say?
I just swallowed coffee grounds. Huh.
Nice. Well, now you'll really wake up.
Yep. Now I'm not gonna sleep.
So like throughout the fight, we have Kurai like he's like you can tell he's like really trying to hold himself back, but it's like he has all this power and he can't use it without like probably killing himself. And like and he knows that, but he's also seeing all these people that he loves and cares about getting hurt over and over when it's just like he's just standing there and that is tearing him up.
Poor tail boy, man, and just like everybody back there.
Everybody's just like, no,
so hard to keep their friend alive.
Hikari, no, Hikari, yes.
They know he's not gonna walk out of something like that because he's barely. I mean, he shouldn't even be there to begin with. But he's a good strategist, so they let him convince them to have him there, right?
Yeah.
And so it's more to keep an eye on him than
like,
anything.
It's like because if they leave him alone,
they know
he'll just sneak off and like get involved in the fight anyway.
Exactly. So they're basically on babysitting duty, him and the kids.
Yeah, pretty much.
But he's not
not gonna take that lying down.
Unfortunately, he is able to.
Well, Mina
slip
gets
out of their
hurt, and
grasp.
he's just like you can just hear the thread snap in his head.
Exactly.
He's just like, nope, that was it. And then we get Naruto references,
Which the boys catching the girls simultaneously. Excuse me, was very cheesy. I'm sorry.
You good there?
I'm still choking on coffee grounds. Thank you.
You're welcome. I mean, it was a little cheesy when it happened in the movie, but I liked it.
It was so
Because
cheesy.
Deku did it with Uraraka.
Did that happen in the movie?
Yep, Deku caught up Uraraka because she tried to get a surprise attack in on 9 from behind.
But no, what I'm saying is the boys catching them and getting them out simultaneously was cheesy.
Deku caught up Uraraka, Bakugo caught Mina.
Yeah.
And then they didn't like carry them away. They just kind of like set them down and then like went back to what they were doing.
Even so, it was cheesy.
Whatever. It's a superhero story. There's gonna be some cheese in there.
Gotta save them damsels in distress.
There weren't damsels in distress. Mina got right back into it.
Yeah, this is true.
She was like, I'm not staying out of this. She went right back in there.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, well, like, okay, so she went right back in there once, like, Kurai finished, like, throwing his tantrum, basically.
So, I mean, that just kind of shows that this version of Mina has a lot more grit at this point because she's seen a lot more. Because, with the current show, spoilers, if you are not caught up on the current season, she does, like, have that moment where she panics. And then, of course, awesome Kirishima jumps in and is able to salvage that attack, which is awesome. I love him. Yep. But that being said, it's like, she's had a lot more character development in this iteration. So it's kind of nice that we get to see her with that grit that she hasn't quite developed yet.
She could be, like, going to check on Kurai because, like, he made a massive apparition with his quirk, which wouldn't be easy for him, like, under normal circumstances. So she knows he has to be hurting right now.
No, she knows what's up. She's staying in the fight.
Yeah, she stayed on it. She did her job.
Yeah, which I like that.
Yeah.
So it gives Mina a lot more to.
I want her to be more than her relationship with Kurai.
Yeah, which is awesome. But at the same time, because of that relationship, the story has changed, and she's changed, and so she's more strong for it as an individual, which is pretty cool. Which ideally that's how it should be.
Yeah, bring out the best
with
of
any
each other.
friendship.
Yeah. I kind of like the little bit where Bakugo's like, "All right, it's my turn. I'm gonna win this," and then Kurai starts freaking out, and he's just like, "Really? Again? You're gonna steal the win again?"
Oh yeah, that was pretty great.
He's just like, "Stop doing that."
Anyway, so then we have, we think we won, but
then lightning happens.
Yes.
And Shoji and Ojiro, they're like, all right, enough's enough. They jump up and clobber Kurai on the head. That they have to knock him out because if they don't stop him, he's just gonna kill himself. Consequences be damned. So they do that, and then, Katsuma sees Kurai's knocked out. He's like, oh, crap. So he starts trying to heal him again, which plays into effect later.
And at this point, that poor kid has just exhausted his quirk. So I don't think that it's doing a lot.
He did some.
Yeah.
He did some. Like, the reason Kurai's able to come back.
Enough to get him moving.
enough to get it moving. So not only does Katsuma's quirk have a healing factor, it also enhances your physical performance. It makes you stronger while it's in effect. So that's why Kurai was able to come back. It wasn't just his own like, oh no, I'm not gonna die yet. Katsuma gave him more than one physical boost. So like he kind of patched him up enough to like where he's not gonna be vomiting blood, but he's still spitting it out. But he also like helped him to power up a little bit.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Which so then of course it's like you got it's like in the movie it was just Deku and Bakugo. I almost called him Kachan. Deku and Bakugo, they go up against Nine. They're like able to drive him back, and they think they've won. In this version, you got them two, Mina, Kurai, and Uraraka, which I had been waiting so long for a planetary devastation opportunity. Like that is one of the coldest moments in anime, if I may say, is when Madara summons a planetary devastation, and then Gaara and Ononoki are able to stop it, and they're like, yeah, we did it. And he's just like, what are you gonna do about the second one?
Yeah.
Drops another one on top of it. I was just like, oh my, what is this?
Yeah.
So like I wanted a moment to create a planetary devastation, and like so Kurai and Uraraka's quirks put together just made for the perfect opportunity for that. I'm so happy that I was able to pull that off.
Very pleased with yourself.
I am pleased with myself. That was a really cool moment for me. Let me have my moment.
No, it's so funny because I hear you say, saying this, and then again, I hear my little fourth graders, oh, Mrs. Cram, I'm going to draw Madara, and like, you remember when he did this, and that, and that, and that, and then he's just so cool, and I'm just like, yeah, he showed up, and he was scary, and he did some stuff, and then,
So they have their moments like, all right, we encased him in a like giant rock sphere and dropped him off a cliff. He's gotta be dead now. Nope. No, he's not. And that's when Kurai finally realizes, oh shit, I'm about to die.
Yep.
Which leads to the unlocking of his final chakra point. Mm-hmm. The final chakra point is supposed to be tied to your spirituality, and is supposedly cleansed when you're able to let go of your earthly attachments. And in this sense, the way that I see it working for him is that he realizes, what's that?
Sorry.
Is that he realizes that he's not going to be around anymore, but that doesn't mean that everything's going to end. Mm-hmm. Life will go. He knows that life will go on without him. He knows it's like if his friends can make it out of this, okay. If they can win, they'll still become great heroes. They'll go on to do the work that he can't. So it's okay. It's like he's obviously not excited that he's gonna die, but he is able to come to the sense of peace where he's like, there's like, if I do die here, that's okay.
Mm-hmm. It's worth something.
It's worth something. He decides that his death is worth it to pursue this course of action.
Yeah.
That's what allows him to unlock his Baryon mode. Now, a lot of people are going to be like, okay, how many Naruto references are you going to throw in here? It is a Naruto reference, but it's more a reference to his power coming from stars. Baryon is the process of I can't remember if it's the hydrogen or something else. It's the process of that splitting and combusting and creating all the explosions that take place in the heart of a star. So that's why he calls it his Baryon mode, because it is literally the core of the power that creates stars. So basically this final form of him is the core. He has to accept this power. He has to accept the consequences. He has to accept what his actions in using it have led to. And that's what allows him to unlock this final stage of its power. That's why I decided to call it the Baryon mode. I had a different name for it originally, and I honestly don't remember what it was at this point, so it probably wasn't that good if I can't remember. I just
love that these anime characters can be in the middle of a life and death battle and be like, I'm gonna name this phenomena that's happening to me right now.
He's a nerd. He's a nerd.
Okay.
Nerd!
All right. So that being said, that final little statement.
That little cutaway that I had there. Originally, I switched the name that I called. So throughout this whole thing, it's Kai, he's acting as Kai, he's being his hero. I wanted that moment to be Kurai. Like, he's not acting as Kai in that moment. He's just, I just wanted that to feel like he was taking a moment to set himself back and understand that, like this was the end of him, not just the end of Kai.
Yeah.
Ugh,
my heart.
Yeah.
I did tear up a bit there.
Did you?
Yeah.
Did you? Yeah, it's just there's just that moment where, like, you can still tell that he, like, while he's come to peace with what he is and what he's come and like what he allowed All for One to do. There's that one line where it's like, he says it's time for the last of All for One's foul experiments to be put to rest. He's not just talking about 9, he's talking about himself mostly. Because he like I said, he's at peace with it, but that doesn't mean that it necessarily changes how he views what happened to him.
Yeah.
He still views himself as something that shouldn't have happened. So it's like him finally coming to terms with all of that. He has all 7 chakra pools unlocked. He is at his most powerful here. And still not enough. They all give it everything they got. Detroit Smash, Howitzer Impact. Uraraka, like, picks up a city-sized chunk of the cliffside
That was
and throws
pretty beastly.
it. Yeah.
That was amazing.
Yeah. Mina, like,
I love that the girls are involved in this.
Yeah, I wanted them to be a part. I absolutely wanted them to be a part of this. They have some really cool abilities. And not that they got wasted in the original movie. Uraraka came in clutch, for sure. She dropped like a freaking avalanche on 9. And then even after that, she tried to go after him.
Yeah.
The girl's got grit. I wanted her to have the same, not opportunity isn't the right word, but I wanted her to showcase that same determination here. And yeah, just the image of Uraraka picking up a cliffside and throwing it at somebody. That was really cool to me. Yeah, and then, so this is the first time that we actually see Kurai do a final flash, because every other time he's technically used the technique. That dog is repulsive when she farts.
Go away.
Go away.
You stink.
Go. You monster.
Ugh, that was bad.
Man. So this is the first time we actually see him use a final flash, like, without combining it with somebody else. And that was definitely I definitely held out on him using a standalone final flash until this moment where he's like, all right, I'm about to die, so it's this or bust.
Yes.
And not enough. Gotta have that. Mine. Sorry. I'm very excited, so it's a little hard for me to speak concisely, but people are either gonna really like or really, really hate that I ended up giving him One for All. And I'm gonna ask y'all to put down the pitchforks until you see what happens with the next chapter before y'all start reaming me for doing this. Cause when I was first planning this story, I was like, all right, I'm gonna plan the story. I wanted to die, and I had a half a thought that I wanted him to get One for All and, like, have that be involved with his death somehow. And that was before I even knew what One for All does to somebody if you have 2 quirks. So that'll obviously that'll play into things later on. But I saw the movie, and I was just like,
This is it.
I was like, this is it. I could not be handed a better opportunity for this. Like, I'm like, I was like trying to figure out, like, what way can I alter events to make it so that Deku, like, has to give him One for All. And then this movie just handed it to me on a silver platter. I was so excited.
He's so excited.
I'm still very excited.
They're gonna eat you alive.
Probably. But you know what? I think it's good
Not
for the
as much so as things down the road.
I mean, but are you talking about? What are you
I
talking
won't give
about?
anything
You're not-
away.
what are you talking about? What are you even talking about?
I can't
You
give it away.
Yeah, you can't give it away. No, Yeah, I'm sure not everybody's gonna like this, but I think it's what's good for the story, so I'm gonna stick to my guns and I'm gonna do it. I really like it. I think you guys will like how the next chapter plays out, because there's something to be said for anime movies not carrying a lot of consequence into the main plot. That is not going to be the case with this coming chapter.
You're gonna give
At
them
all.
a heart attack.
Like,
You're gonna give them anxiety now.
good. They give me anxiety over what they're going to say in their reviews because they've gotten mean lately.
I'm worried for you. Hi, kid. Go to sleep. Go to sleep.
Children are normally supposed to be asleep when the podcast is being filmed. That didn't happen here. But as I was saying, I'm sticking to my guns. I'm going to do this thing. I think that I've come up with something that I honestly haven't seen in other My Hero stories. Like, I've read up on quite a few of them, trying to see if anybody's come up with this idea that I'm going to be executing in the next chapter. And so far, I've not found one. So I hope that encourages you guys to stick around and maybe not completely bite my head off. But I had a lot of fun writing this chapter. I have even more fun planned for the next one.
Yes. We hope you keep reading.
Yes.
Please.
Yes.
It's fun to hear from you guys.
Yes.
So,
Yes. Whether it's good or bad, I do enjoy hearing from you
and
guys.
chapters will keep coming.
Yes.
But yes, we'd love to have you guys.
Yep.
Thank you for all the support this whole 3-year endeavor.
Almost 3 years, yeah.
Oh my goodness.
3 years it takes to kill this guy.
But yes, thank you guys.
So again, I promise he's gonna die next chapter. He's gonna stay dead, and there's gonna be consequences for that.
All right. Well, I think that's about it for today.
All right. Let us know what you guys thought, and we will. Oh wait, there was one other thing. I'm sorry. This was really important. I'm sorry.
So done.
I'm sorry. This was really, really important to me.
Okay.
So, in the moment in the movie when Deku hands the quirk off to Bakugo, they're both thinking of All Might, right? Because like that's who they want to become.
Yeah.
In this one, Kurai's thinking of Lemillion because he saw
Yes.
what Lemillion became after he lost his quirk,
Yes.
and that's what gives him the push to real. He's
love
like
that.
Deku doesn't need a quirk.
That's true.
So like
forgot
that
about that.
more than anything is what allows him to be like, okay, if this is how we win, then this is how it has to be. He takes the quirk. To me, it was a small distinction, but because like
that's a big deal.
All Might he respects, but he respects Lemillion way more. Like if you have to put if you like, he's never thought about it up to this point, but he holds Lemillion in a higher regard than he ever will All Might.
Well, I mean, there's something to be said for being in the room with that person as they make the ultimate sacrifice.
This is true. This is true. Yeah, but like him seeing that and seeing what Lemillion did, that was his moment that like moved him. So like in this time where it's like where he's thinking like, what do I do? What do I do? And you start to think like, what would this person that I admire do? Like normally he'd probably think of his dad or maybe his uncle, but his uncle and his dad never been in a situation like this. So his brain defaults to Lemillion, who was faced with a similarly impossible choice. You know, do I keep my quirk or do I take the bullet for these kids?
Yeah.
And Kurai chooses to take the bullet here.
Yep.
So,
All right.
now we're really done. Thank you guys for hearing me out. We'll catch you on the next chapter, and I hope you have a Plus Ultra couple of weeks until then. Take care.